forehead in order to buy or sell. Have the world's wealthiest men and women been caught by surprise, or have they sold out? Have they sold their souls? Indeed. Tonight we have on with us Mr. Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com, and just a great brother and just a great brother and a man of God. And our guest, which I'll introduce before bringing Joe on and in advance of his appearance here, David Morgan. David Morgan is a precious metals aficionado. He's armed with degrees in finance and economics, as well as engineering. Mr. Morgan created the website silverinvestor.com, which is linked off of hagmanandhagman.com. And he originated the Morgan Report. Now, that's a monthly newsletter that covers economic news, overall financial health of the global economy, currency problems, and really the key reasons for investing in precious metals. I can't think of a better combination of people between David Morgan and Steve Quayle. Steve Quayle, of course, Renaissance Precious Metals. And folks, when you're dealing, and let me just say this to our listeners, especially the new listeners, when you're dealing with purchasing quantities of precious metals, you need to have someone you can trust. And I'll tell you something, I would not trust anybody out there with my money, with other people's money, with your money, other than Steve Quayle, the Renaissance Precious Metals, stevequayle.com. And of course, Mr. Morgan, with his information, his ideas can be seen, by the way, in the movie Four Horsemen, which is a featured documentary. And folks, just so you know, Mr. Morgan, as publisher of the Morgan Report, he's appeared on CNBC, Fox Business, and in BNN in Canada. He's been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, Futures Magazine, the Gold Report, and countless other publications. So this man knows of which he speaks. Visit his website, which is linked off of ours at silver-investors.com, and also, you know too, folks, stevequayle.com. Joe, welcome to the studio.
Glad to be here. No, you didn't. I just want to bring on both of our guests, Mr. Steve Quayle and Mr. David Morgan. They are both live with us. It's glad to be here on this week of Thanksgiving, and we thank both of you gentlemen, Steve, for being on with us. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. It's kind of a privilege for me to have David Morgan on. David and I can remember going back 20 years when I first started talking, well, not when I first, but a couple years into my radio broadcasting career. When I wanted to know about silver, I wanted to bring on who I call Mr. Silver. Most people don't understand, though. David travels the world, and he gets what I would call an in-the-field perspective. It's one thing to quote all the experts. It's another thing to go to the mines. It's another thing to go and listen to the different people who are in what I would call, whether they're in the trading pits or in the mining pits. David gets it all. So tonight we're going to talk about so many things, but what most people don't realize, if you want to see an amazing documentary where David is featured, you can go to the Four Horsemen feature documentary on my video of the day. I think it's the number 2, number 2. And I asked David right now to come on, and before we get into all the nitty-gritty, and there's so much news, Doug, as you alluded to in your intro, that I think a perspective of history is necessary, because the Romans went downhill when they debased their currency. Everybody thinks of the carnality and the Colosseums and everything, but David said a fascinating thing. Hi, David. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Steve. It's good to be with you, and thank you for getting me on the Hagman Show. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. David, let's kind of take this historically. I'm not talking, a whole bunch, but just, you said to me the other day when we were setting up this show, something even was profound, or as profound as what you said. I'd never heard that before. Share that, because I think if people can get this and get the other things we're talking about, they'll understand not only the lateness of the hour, but our appointment in destiny as a once great nation. We're going the way of Rome. Go ahead and just take it wherever you want it and go for it, my brother.
Okay, will do. So let's read a plot summary of the Four Horsemen, because there's probably a fair amount of people that are not familiar with the film, and it's based on the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, obviously, and it is about that, but in modern times. So This is from IMDb, which most people are familiar with that watch many movies. The modern-day Four Horsemen continues to ride roughshod over the people who can at least afford it. Crises are converging when governments, religion, and mainstream economists have stalled. 23 international thinkers come together and break their silence about how the world really works and why there is still hope in reestablishing a moral and just society. Four Horsemen is a free from mainstream media propaganda. Is free. Excuse me, I misread that. Four Horsemen is free from mainstream media propaganda. Doesn't bash bankers, criticize politicians, or get involved in conspiracy theories. The film ignites the debate about how we usher in a new economic paradigm into the world, which globally would dramatically improve the quality of life for billions. So it started with me. I was doing a show in London with James Turek, Max Kaiser, a lot of the people that I travel with as far as the speaking circuit on a global basis is concerned. It was run by a hedge fund manager friend of mine, Ned Mueller-Leyland. Ned invited me, and I met the Ashcrofts, and I was asked to speak on, what I do, my expertise, which is basically monetary history, how silver plays into that in the global economy and the situation at hand. So it's filmed for probably an hour and a half, and I haven't counted them, probably 6 small segments in the film. Now, what you asked me, Steve, I'm going to get to, and this is something I didn't know until the film came out, because I got like the preview after the film was, cut and edited and all that. And what I found, and I'm certainly not a know-it-all, I'll establish that right at the beginning. I certainly know a great deal about the precious metals markets, and thanks for the intro, Steve, because I am a guy that has been to CME. Rick Santilli himself gave me a tour of the bond pit of the whole CME facility, I'll call it, last time I was in Chicago to go into the pits themselves. And I've certainly been in many, many mines. And I've certainly been with investment bankers in Hong Kong and London. So I do have a rather global perspective, a perspective that I feel very fortunate to have established over many, many years, being so interested in the monetary system and the precious metals in particular. But now I come back to your point. The film talks about what I just read, the demise of empire, and that's where we're at. It's the demise of what I call the Anglo-American empire, which is basically the banking cartel run from London to New York and back and forth between the two primarily. So what I didn't know was at the end of empire, you get into this situation where one of the most sought-after entities is the chefs, the food. It's who can outdo who. And so Steve and I, before the show, he talked a great deal about what we wanted to talk about, and I pointed out to Steve that in the film it outlines that right before the collapse there's this great almost worship of all these chefs, and we have that. I mean, I'm not a big TV watcher. I don't have time. I think it's a waste of time for the most part. I do watch documentaries. I do see some TV. Usually it's to, better my mind or educate myself or look at stuff on the right, the left, and the in-between. Nonetheless, we have the Iron Chef and, the drivers dive into dives. I know that from a good friend of mine. And that's all the stuff is all about food, chef, and like right there, right now. So I thought I'd point that out, that, history repeats. It doesn't repeat exactly, but this cycle of fiat money and control and starting off on a sound basis with sound money morphs into a system that cannot go much further, and it collapses. And so this is not a new story. And the precursors to it are right in front of us if you know what to look for. I didn't know about the chef one until I saw the movie, and now I do.
Well, we're at the point, David, where again, there's a battle going on. There's a battle between the hard metal people and true commodity-based, what I call realism, versus just the paper hangers. And I don't think that we can go on much longer. I think it's important, too. Did it surprise you, David, when the Obama administration, a couple of years ago made the statement, and I think it was they were talking, one of the head guys was talking to Kyle Bass and said their goal was to destroy the American dollar, and there wasn't hardly a whimper a twitch or a complaint from the majority of Congress or the Senate. Did that even take you by surprise? Because we've been talking about this, you obviously in your circles, me on talk radio, for a couple decades. But that went kind of over everybody's head. What was your thought when you saw the lack of response to probably one of the most devastating blows, and I would call it financial hara-kiri, only they're not going to put the knives in their own guts, they're going to put it in the guts of the American people. You know, they're altruistic to basically make it sound good, but remember, everybody, the samurai sword and the now all the little swords, and I forget what the name of it is, Wakizashi or something, are going into our guts. So what was your response when you saw that? The abject admission that they're going to destroy the dollar.
Well, I thought it was very bold, and of course it should have shivered down my spine that they would just be so blatant about it. But, you know, their mandate, meaning the Federal Reserve's mandate when Congress gave up their responsibility of the monetary system. It's very clear in the Constitution who has the mandate to control money, and it is not a private bank. But that's what happened at the end of December 1913, and really established, to say it was established in 1913, which it was voted upon, with many members of Congress missing in action due to the holidays. Nonetheless, it did occur. But their mandate is a stable monetary system. Now, if you go on the Federal Reserve website and you establish from their numbers, not ours, what a $1913 is worth today using their metrics, you'll find out it's worth about 4 cents. So if their job is to have monetary stability, they have failed miserably. And in fact, I think a way to emphasize the failure is to think about, for those of you who have kids and those that don't, imagine that you do, or you have grandkids, or you have somebody in your neighborhood that's probably like 6, 7, 8 years old, and they have a 100-point quiz. And they come back with that piece of paper, and they get 4/100. In other words, they get 4 out of 100. I think anybody that understands what I just said would consider that to be an absolute objective failure. And yet that's where the monetary system is. So people argue with me, well, it hasn't collapsed. And what we're really arguing about is the last 4 cents left out of 100. It has collapsed. In fact, I didn't hear all of the intro, but the Hagmans do an excellent job on every show I've ever heard. Certainly I don't have time to listen to them all, but I've listened to several. And the idea that these bankers wouldn't accept each other's paper in 2008 from the study I've done is absolutely true. These guys packaged up complete garbage, rated it AAA, and sold it off to all kinds of entities, pension funds, hedge funds, other nation states, and they just spread it out all over the place. And it was fraud, is what it really was. So when the system seized up, it was basically banker A to banker B saying, I don't trust you anymore. Well, the whole thing is a con game. It's a confidence game. A con man is someone that gains your confidence, and the whole system is based on confidence, and it's been that way for a long time. So what happened was the Fed came in, the Federal Reserve, and basically, threw up their hands and said, okay, this bank A to bank B is just an analogy for the entire system. I hope that's clear to everyone. I'm talking simple terms to make the point, but we're talking the whole banking system is seized up temporarily. And so Bank A says, I don't trust that paper, and Bank B says, well, I don't trust your paper. So they came in, the Fed, and said, look, give us that paper, and we'll give you this wonderful paper called Treasury bills. That's our paper. That's government-backed paper. Government-backed paper means the ability to tax the citizenry until they're so broke that they can't stand. But that paper is good paper. We'll take your A paper, Bank A paper, we'll give you Treasury bills. Bank B will take your paper, we'll give you Treasury bills. And now you can start trading again because you got this great paper called Treasury bills. Okay? And they said, sure, that's great. It's wonderful. We'll let the games continue. So the games continue. So this whole buyback QE thing started with QE1 and continues. Now, if QE1 worked, you wouldn't need QE2 or QE3 because QE1 would have done it. But it didn't do it. So I forecast way back in 2000, and to come full circle, Steve, back and it probably generated some thoughts, is that we were going from the time of the paper pusher, they call them, or a paper paradigm is probably a better wording, of stocks, internet stocks, tech, the Japan boom, all that stuff. And we were going from a time at the top of the market in 2000, the old top, and in real terms, but still the true top if you inflation adjust it, to things that we want, to things that we need, and that we would see a huge commodity cycle boom starting roughly at that point in time. In other words, the commodity cycle was bottoming, the equity cycle was topping, and it would be a reversal. And I would make a strong point that I was accurate. It wasn't just me. There were several that made that similar forecast at about that time. And the commodity cycle usually goes for about 17 years. So you could say, well, that forecast or projects to 2017. And I think that still is the case. But definitely it comes back again. I want to emphasize it, everyone, that it's about what you need, not what you want. And certainly, you know, me being a part of the boomer generation, certainly I said it in the movie and I've said it many times, that it's not, you know, I was born in the wrong generation. I mean, I am much more of a millennial type thinker. I really think that we should really be good stewards of what we have. And, you know, I'm ashamed to say it, and I've said it on other radio shows, but I am ashamed that my generation had the audacity to have bumper stickers when I was in my 20s and 30s that said, "He who dies with the most toys wins." I mean, that kind of thinking is just bizarre to me. But that kind of typifies what the baby boomer generation was all about, and many of them still are. But nonetheless, we have witnessed the biggest collapse in the financial system in 2008, and nothing has been done to make it better, other than propaganda, and more propaganda. But nothing has been fixed.
Well, wasn't it an amazing, in-your-face admission of that when the military, even for the first time, at least admittedly, had a department of propaganda? Didn't that kind of take your breath away? It didn't take my breath away from the standpoint of gasping, but I thought, they're telling you what they're going to do right in front of the whole world. The whole world's watching, and to my knowledge, there wasn't one, and I don't watch television much. I watch like the History Channel and stuff like that, but there wasn't one major network, news network, that really understood that statement. And you know, I quote Orwell in a time of you know, what is it, universal delusion, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And now you've got everybody who's basically in charge of the loony bin, printing money, spending money. It's all paper. Meanwhile, China and Russia are buying so much gold by the tonnage, and I want you to address that right now because, you know, Dave, 20 years ago when we were on together and stuff, even then I made this statement, and, you know, I'm sure Doug's admitted to thinking I was crazy, and I don't remember when he started listening to me, but it was probably around 2000, right around the turn of the century. But the point being is that I was making the statements then that the Chinese would be the next superpower. I based that upon the fact that the greedy bankers wanted more Chinese with credit cards, and what's better than an American population indebted and snared for the rest of their life on the what I call the interest hamster wheel than, you know, getting 1.2 billion people paying interest on their credit cards. And then I made the statement, at some point in the future, China will back the yuan or the renminbi, it goes by both names, with gold, and Russia will do the same. So, would you address just the massive volume of gold that's being purchased by Russia and China? And then, what happens, and how do you see, if and when Russia and China both call America's bluff and they're not able, the United States isn't able to produce, you know, the gold that's been on deposit with the Fed or with whoever, how do you see that unfolding? Because we're seeing indications of that tonight when I sent you James Turk's article, and you've spoken different places around the world with him, but I mean, it's a pretty dire article. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, it's posted on my website. I think it's second or third from the top headline, but address that, David, because this is a huge thing, and most people don't even, you know, they can't yawn, burp, or break wind over it.
Absolutely. I think one of the first things to address before I get to your question, because it's an extremely important question, is one of the arguments that I've gotten over the years, and that is, well, what you say, David, might be right, and, you do have some facts to, make your case, but, it's not going to happen to me, it's not going to happen to my kid, that's in the future, that's sometime. Well, Mike Maloney did a study, and others, and basically what we find out is that the time you go on a fiat monetary system until you get a collapse is 40 years. So we went off the gold standard August 15th, 1971. You had 40 years here, 2011. It's not a precise number. It's roughly 40 years. So we're right in what I would call the sweet spot, if you want to call it sweet, for where a collapse will happen. Now for your question, Steve. Yes, massive amounts of gold have been going into China. They underreport what they're actually buying. For all practical purposes, all the above-ground mine supply that's produced on an annual basis is going to India and China year over year over year. No gold comes out of China. All gold that is mined in China stays within China. And we should remember the golden rule, which is this. There's two golden rules, probably more than that, but the do unto others rule I think we're familiar with, but the golden rule from the banking perspective is he who owns the gold makes the rules. So if we do, and the short version of monetary history is fiat money collapse, gold standard, stability, fiat money system collapse, gold standard. It cycles back and forth. Now that's a very top level view, and you could argue with me it's not exactly that way, and it's not. I'm just trying to put that out there to make the point. So if we've taken into consideration that the central banks of the world have been net buyers of gold for the last few years, even though they propagandize that it's a barbarous relic and who wants it, who would hold it, watch what they do, not what they say. Again, they've been net buyers of gold for several of the last, not several years, but a few years, and I forget how many, probably something like 4 or 5, probably since the 2008 crisis, but I have to check. But it is a fact that they are net buyers now. And on top of that, who really owns the gold? Now, the United States keeps stating that they have 261 million ounces of fine gold on a piece of paper when they put it out on their annual, basically, statement saying, what the reserves are of the United States. But it's a line item. And if you read the fine print, it's gold and gold receivables. So what is it? Is it swap gold, loan gold, deep storage gold, underwater gold? Is it pure gold? Is it coin melt gold? And really, who's the owner? I mean, so much of the derivatives market is based upon a specific commodity or a specific stock or some specific thing, financial or otherwise. And then there's products that derive from that. So gold is no exception. There's derivatives on gold that have to do with leasing and swapping and loaning, and there's all kinds of things. And so to get the chain of command of who really owns it at the end of the day is very difficult. But when you can go touch it, you can own it. And that's certainly on the individual level, and it also is on the nation-state level. So China has been accumulating gold for a very long time. I, like you, Steve, mentioned that it could be a very distinct possibility when this house of cards does fall, that the renminbi would be, or the yuan would be backed by gold, and that they would start in as basically, and it could be Russia as well, certainly, and Russia's buying massive amounts of gold as well, a situation where history repeats again. We go from a paper paradigm where the banking elite trap as many people into these situations of pension funds and retirement accounts, bank accounts, life insurance policies, annuities, all these things that people have a lot of faith in and confidence in, and they lose that confidence literally overnight in some cases, and we find out that the new monetary structure has gone from west to east, and it's moving that way and has been for quite some time. There's very little argument against that if you look at the facts. And we find that someday that the Chinese and the Russians are the ones that basically have a stable monetary system and are able to reboot the system, because the system is basically bogged down like it was temporarily in 2008, and there's no trust left, and the only trust that is available is something that is a gold-backed currency of some type. Now, I'm not forecasting that's exactly how it's going to go down. That is a possibility. It's a distinct possibility. Certainly the facts lean in that direction, but I am studied enough and aware enough to know that there's all kinds of possibilities out there that some I'm very aware of, different scenarios, and some I'm unaware of that are still possible. So how's it going to shake out? I don't know exactly, and I'm not saying that's the only way. But certainly it shows probability-wise, it's certainly worth considering, because that is the situation that we've seen throughout history. Whoever is producing the most is accumulating the gold. That's how the United Kingdom became what they were at one time, which was, the sun never set on that empire. And then as they debased the monetary system, the United States was the one that took it over from the United Kingdom. And now those days are waning rapidly for the United States. And, of course, again, it's going to the east, primarily China. And we can include Russia as well. Really, the BRICS is part of it. That's what it's stated. I mean, they have worked very hard to escape the Anglo-American Empire by starting their own settlement system outside the SWIFT system. They have started their own World Bank. They don't call it that, but it's essentially what it is. And they're very much making contracts left, right, and center to do business with each other in their own currencies and circumvent the dollar altogether. And the final, I think, part of that three-legged stool is the U.S. military and the petrodollar, and they're basically sawing away at the petrodollar because they are looking at oil settlement outside of the U.S. Dollar system. So it's getting very shaky indeed, and these are realities. I mean, I'm not here, I don't like the term doom porn because, I want to be objective, I want to be truthful, I want to be honest, but I also think it's important, in fact, it's a calling the way I see it, to tell the people what the objective truth is that we know. When I have an opinion, I'll tell you it's my opinion, but the facts are the accumulation of gold has been going east from the west to the east for a very long time. And Steve, I'm going to hand it back over to you, but I think we want to drill down on that meme a bit because we're going into December here real soon, and there's been a lot of people on the internet talking about the delivery month for the month of December and what could happen. And I'm not one that's going to say, this is going to take place. Nonetheless, some very interesting things have lined up in the financial markets. And again, James Turk was one of several that has said, things are getting to a certain point right here, right now, that we really have to pay attention.
So, Steve, if I can... Yeah, go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, just let me ask a question here. Mr. Morgan, I did write a column back in late February, I believe it was, 2013, that exposed the Kyle Bass interview. And I although it's not stated specifically, I believe Bass was talking with Geithner at the time, that in the context of killing off the U.S. dollar. And I just want to let people know, by the way, that that article, I reprinted the article, put it back up on HagmannandHagmann.com. But that said, what could be more seditious? What could be more traitorous than killing off the U.S. dollar?
Absolutely nothing. It's basically, even the atheists have faith in the dollar. And it's something that's extremely important for all of us. And again, the mandate was to have stability. The way you have a stable society is to have a stable monetary system. It's a direct correlation between the debasement of the currency and the debasement of the moral structure of the society. And I went through that in the film The Four Horsemen. If you look how Rome started as a republic, the senators really did represent the people. And you had a stable monetary system based on a silver standard. And as it went forward, they started to debase the currency by taking the silver coins in and putting more and more base metal in them. That's how you got the word debasement. And they would recirculate them with the same face value, even though the weight of silver was less and less and less. And as that took place, decade after decade, in the centuries, you had a huge displacement in what the moral structure of the society was. And you got to the end where the senators were basically grabbing as much loot as they could get away with. And that's all they were doing. They could care less about the people. And yet the people were pacified by going to the Colosseum for free bread and circuses. And it's very much like the welfare structure that exists today, that you can come from wherever you are, or if you're here already, and get a handout, and, you know, get your big screen TV at the Goodwill or whatever, and get your EBT card. And I'm not trying to put down the poor. I mean, I'm pretty open-minded, and I'm certainly, you know, just look at the film or not. I mean, do what you want. I'm not here to control or tell anybody what to do. I'm certainly here to give a message. But the point is that things are drastically wrong, and they've been going wrong for a long time, and they're accelerating. And that's the point I want to make. That's why I bring up this December thing, because the point I was making there, and thank you, Doug, for what you pointed out. This Carl Bass thing is very, very important. I mean, they basically are signaling ahead to everybody that the dollar's not going to last much longer. Yet very few people believe it, even when they are told that that's what's going to happen. Nonetheless,
exactly.
This December is it's a delivery month for the precious metals. There's always been an argument about what if China or some entity or some, you know, Warren Buffett or even a couple medium-sized hedge funds, for crying out loud, in the silver market, stood for delivery and forced the COMEX to deliver gold or silver. And my take is, again, a studied view, because there are circuit breakers in that paper paradigm that protect not only the shorts, but protect the paper. And the rules that are in place are that you're only allowed to take so much physical off the exchange, and then they can, at any time, it's not going to be changing the rules. The rule already exists that you have to settle in cash. But the caveat is that if they do make you settle in cash, then by any measure of common sense, it is a default. I mean, when people see that, then that's going to say, well, this is something that's definitely wrong. Now, they'll make some excuse, they'll spin it, they'll get the mainstream press to, you know, I don't know, do what, make everyone think it was a wonderful thing that they got, you know, quote unquote US dollars for, rather than getting the metal itself or whatever. I'm not saying that's going to happen. What I am saying is that the amount of gold, especially gold by far more than silver on the COMEX, I'm speaking COMEX specific now, the CME, is so small relative to the outstanding contracts, it borders on the word pitiful. So, you know, it remains to be seen. I don't rule it out. I would love to see
David,
it happen.
David, give an example, though, because when you say pitiful, people, you know, they have no clue. Tell how much is there for delivery versus how many contracts are there against what's available.
I'm doing this from memory. I'll give you the right idea. I think it's 800. I forget what it is in terms. The cover ratio is like 100 to 1. In other words, the outstanding contracts are like 100 times greater than the amount of gold that's sitting on the COMEX. That's a rough number.
Right, and that's what I was asking. What about silver?
Silver is about the same. The silver inventories have actually been increasing for the last 2 years, and I am just confounded as to why. The reason I say that is because when this thing happened with Corzine, the people's accounts were basically flushed away from them, and the CME did not make good on those contracts, and some people got back about 80 cents on the dollar. With that money and some physical being stolen from people, I thought that, you know, would be such a wake-up call that very few people would want to store real metal with the COMEX. I was wrong. More and more metal keeps pouring into the COMEX in both categories. There's two categories in the COMEX, and this might be worth talking about because a lot of people know this and there's many that don't. There's a registered category and an eligible category. The eligible category is eligible to be sold or moved or transferred, but it isn't available for that until someone signs a certificate saying, yes, you can move my metal. It's basically long-term investors that own the metal and they're using one of the COMEX warehouses, which are primarily banks, to store their metal. And that makes sense if you're a hedge fund or a very wealthy individual or something like that. You don't want, $2 million, $10 million, $20 million, $100 million worth of metal sitting in your house. You want it in a bank vault with your name on it and your entity's name on it. And you want it safe and secure. So that all makes sense. That's eligible. That is the amount that is very difficult to mobilize. The other category is the registered category. That is your primary dealers. That's your bullion banking consortium. That's a much smaller number than the eligible category in both the gold and silver. And that's the real float. That's the amount that could really be mobilized at any one time. So when you compare the amount of open interest, or that is the amount of contracts that have the right to take delivery, versus the amount of registered in both the gold and silver categories, what you find is that there is, again, an extremely small amount of real metal versus what there is on paper. And it's been that way in all the commodities. I want to be fair, I want to be objective. But it's really, really interesting because it could be forced. I mean, even though the rules are in place that limit the amount that can be taken in any given month, it could be tested pretty easily. In fact, going back years, I asked that question at a silver consortium that was here in my home state that was put together by Phillips Baker, the new CEO of Heck Lining. And he did, I thought, something that I really enjoyed, and that was he brought together all facets of the silver industry. He brought in the CME, the COMEX people. He brought in the Silver Users Association. He brought in the Silver Institute. He brought myself. He brought, I can't think of them all, but, like the jewelry industry representatives. He brought in like the coin industry representative. I mean, he basically covered every facet you could think of that had anything to do with the hard metal itself and some of the major mining companies. And the gentleman that spoke for the Commodities Exchange basically said, and this can't be, I mean, I can, I'll take it as hearsay. He said that they never changed the rules on the hunts, which I find hard to believe, but that was his statement. I can't go back and dig that out, so I don't know if that's true or not. But I asked him specifically the question we've been kind of skirting around, and that is, well, what if someone stood for delivery and was taking the 7.5 million ounces that by your contract says is the most I can take in any given month, but you only have 6 months worth of inventory. So what if I stood for 7.5 million ounces 1 month and the next month and the next month? She said, well, you wouldn't want to do that. I said, well, how do you know what I want to do? Humor me. I mean, it's the cheapest way to buy it. You buy commercial bars for a spot price plus a few pennies and a little bit of transportation costs. It's a very efficient way to buy silver. And he really didn't answer my question because he couldn't. Because if someone were to do that or several people were to do that, they would run out. Now, again, I'm not forecasting that's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. What I am suggesting is that it's more of a paper paradigm that's protected by the elites than anything else. It certainly is not the main facility for where you are going to get gold and silver, but it does set the price. And
now let's talk, David. Yeah, let's talk about now China, okay? Because they just opened up the Shanghai Exchange, and China's got different rules than, let's just say this, the magicians on Wall Street. China will not allow naked shorting, meaning selling silver below the market cost or the spot price set worldwide without being able to prove that silver exists. Whereas you touched on earlier in the conversation the fact that in America, once the COMEX decides there's a limit on a monthly basis to how much physical silver or gold can be withdrawn, that will not exist in the Shanghai Exchange. And a friend of mine who's a gold broker said this. He says, in China it's different. You have to prove you own the bars. You have to prove with all kinds of paperwork. And he said the buyer and the seller sit down at a table, and if there's any fraudulent misrepresentation on the part of the buyer or the seller, the fraudulent presenter goes to prison. Now, let me ask you this, because I don't think anybody's ever asked you this. With China instilling what I would say, it's kind of interesting, they're going to what I would call true market value or proof in possession and true market value. How does that affect the COMEX and London and every place else when they've been used to being able to issue liar's paper and cover with cash or British pounds or euros, and now the Chinese are saying, we're going to give a true market value, and there is no such thing as selling short. How do you see that fitting in?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, that the primary move has been for the precious metals, primarily gold, from west to east, and that China is slowly and surely going to be the financial center of the world at some point, and primarily in the metals markets, they're going to take over the physical market in the metals, gold and silver, and others as well. Like the LME has a lot to do with, I wouldn't call them exotic metals, but your tin, your nickel, iron ore even. I mean, a lot of the metals come through the London Metals Exchange. So that's all going to move to the east, at least the precious metals, and probably first the precious metals. So it is a no-nonsense market. And as Harvey Organ and many others have talked about, many others in the silver space and the gold space have talked about how much has been drained off the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And it's true. So there is definitely a shift going, and this is the kind of markets people want. I mean, I find it ironic. I think it's one of the greatest ironies that, I grew up, thinking that, bad China, bad Russia, communists, etc. And I'm certainly not a pro-communist, I'm going to make that clear. But I find it ironic that, Russia and China seem to be giving the most accurate and have the highest integrity when it comes to their gold dealings by far than anybody in the Anglo-American Empire, where they're just doing, as you said, Steve, this paper paradigm concept. If I could just backtrack for a minute, I finally got my computer to bring it up. But the amount of registered silver is about 65 million ounces. The amount of eligible silver is about 112 million ounces. So there's roughly almost double the amount of silver in the COMEX warehouses that are just sitting there held by long-term investors that think the price of silver is going higher. That's a blanket generality. Is it true in every absolute specific case? No. But the generalization is very accurate. So there's about twice as much sitting there. So when you look at the combined total of 177 million ounces of silver in the COMEX, you might say to yourself, well, geez, that's a pretty, good amount of silver sitting there. And I would say, yeah, it is. But if you narrow it down and understand what I said earlier about the amount of registered, the amount that the dealers have to play with is about 65 million. That really is a small number relative to the financial markets. It's a very, very small number. It's a very precious commodity. Yet, if you listen to all the, and Steve, I'll defer back to you on this, all of the nomenclature around the silver market's kind of bothered me for years. And of course, I'm probably super sensitive to it, but it's junk silver. It's the scrap market. It's all these derogatory terms that surround silver, yet it's really a very precious and vital commodity. In fact, it's essential in almost all modern technology. I mean, it's the best technology stock you can own is silver because it's vital in anything electronic or electrical. But yet you get this nomenclature, again, I repeat myself, junk bags, scrap silver, and that type of thing. I'd love you, Steve, to comment on that.
Well, as what's interesting is junk silver, let me explain that for everyone. Junk silver are pre-64, that means 1964 and earlier, dimes, quarters, and halves. Although there were some silver nickels, you don't usually see bags of silver nickels. So we're talking dimes, quarters, and halves. In a junk bag, there's 1,000 face value. That means there would be 10,000 dimes, 4,000 quarters, or 2,000 halves. Again, most the days years ago, Dave, as you remember, there were junk bags of silver dollars. Those days are gone because the silver dollars have value in excess of their bullion content, whereas junk silver
simply means pre-64 coinage. Having said that, I keep up on it pretty regularly, what's available in the marketplace. And what's fascinating, every time there's been a move in the metals up, junk silver bags have been delayed. I don't know, are you aware of that? They're delayed 1 and 2 weeks now, and if you wanted to buy up most of the junk silver bags available in the market in a given week, it would basically be about 100 bags. Now, that's checking with 3 of the biggest guys. Even if we're 200 bags, and today, let's say, there's 715 ounces, the premium, you'd be paying $12,000, $13,000 a junk bag, and that's if they're available. Then we're talking about a fascinating thing that I've observed over, 3 decades of being in the precious metals, Dave, is that I will see the people move into the market and buy more silver at 3 times the price or 2.5 times the price it is now versus being able to buy. And that's why the Silver Eagle phenomenon was so amazing to me. And one day they sold, 1,425,000 Silver Eagles. And right now we are on, meaning the dealers and even the distributors that buy directly from the mint, and then the mint sells to those of us who are dealers, they're on strict allocation. And what you're talking about is 2013, just under 43 million U.S. Silver Eagles. This year it's going to be over 43 million. So what's fascinating to me is that not only do we have backwardation, but and that just means the present price is more than the future price of metals, and that's when you see backwardation, it's telling you, or it's indicating that there's going to be a metal move market up. But the point that I'm trying to get to is, I'll give you an interesting thing about silver. Silver, if you go on Wikipedia or try and find out what India says they have in silver, you'll see charts that'll give them between 300 and 500 million ounces, or it'll give them, it'll give them really pathetic numbers. And, and when they do it in tons, well, I'll give you an example. Gold is 500 tons or less. That's the official number. According to one of the Indian silver experts, he said it's 11,000 tons. And 11,000 tons is equal to what China admits to without the great historic hoard. Saying all that, when China or Russia or both, independent, decide that it's time to, number one, call, and this is not Dave Morgan, this is Steve Quayle speaking, when they decide to call the bluff of the United States and for true price discovery and what's really there. And again, people don't understand that there is no independent audit, has been none, and which brings me to the fact, Dave, that people don't understand. The silver that's in the market or in the pipeline is dependent upon the source people, whether it's the miners and refiners, being able to provide it to the different mints. And so the point is, when I talk to all the people I know around the world, they're all saying something. There is a finite amount of product available when you talk about either gold, silver, platinum, or palladium. Whenever you talk about any of those metals, you're talking about a specific amount, a specific quantity that's in the pipeline. Once the pipeline empties, it's not as easy as saying abracadabra, I'll get more silver. So the point that, I don't know if you're hearing that too, but I'm hearing that on an accelerated basis. And this is from some of the biggest physical gold dealers in the world. Your comment?
Yeah, I'd like to add on a couple things, and thanks for that. I think it's very important for people to understand. One is, yes, the bag market I am familiar with, and it's usually a good indicator. When the bag market tightens up and the premiums on bags go high or higher, it's an indication that the metals prices are going to start moving up. So we have that indicator. Coming back to what I said earlier, I was going to give the number on gold from memory, but I thought, no, it's just too small. If I say that number, I'm going to be wrong. So while you were talking, I was able to get on the CME website. So here's the gold numbers. Let's give you the silver numbers. Remember what I said about registered and eligible. Registered is really all the dealers have to quelch stand for delivery notice. So if someone stops out the contract, says, yeah, I'm paying for it in full, I put up only 10% margin, here's the rest of the cash, I want the gold, send it over to me, there is 868,910 ounces. Now, if you don't realize how small that is compared to the 5 billion ounce gold market, when there's less than 1 million ounces, there's 868,000. There's not even 1 million ounces of gold on the COMEX in the registered category. And the eligible, remember, those are people that have it in vaults that are holding on to it because they think gold's going higher. There's 7 million ounces. So there's approximately 1/10 as much in the registered category. I mean, this is absolutely such a pathetically small number. It's almost begging that someone come in and call their bluff on this. And maybe it'll happen, Steve. I certainly wouldn't rule it out. So those are my two comments. One is the bag market is indicating. Two is that the amount of gold in the COMEX is absolutely pathetically small relative to the outstanding contracts. And three is your overview of where this is going, what the Chinese are going to force onto the world stage, if you want to call it that, in the financial realm. And they're doing it, I think, rather quietly, establishing, the Shanghai Gold Exchange and having all this gold go through that exchange. And then this other thing that no one really talks about that much, and that is the re-refining of all this gold that's going through the huge Swiss refineries. Why are they taking all this LVMA gold and refining it into kilo bars? Well, one is perhaps the Chinese are going to establish a new gold standard on kilos rather than on ounces. And what if there's some less than suitable gold out there? I'm not saying there's a bunch of gold-plated tungsten bars out there, but there have been a few. So that could be part of it. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I want to get in a big conspiracy debate here. What I am suggesting that is I find it fascinating that a lot of that gold is being re-refined because it takes energy, it takes time, it takes transportation. There's a specific reason for it. It could be as simple as the new gold standard is going to be in kilos, not in ounces. I don't know. I'll take it at that. That's a logical, simple answer. Steve, I'll turn it back over to you because you probably got some comments on that, 868,000 ounces that remains in the registered category on the COMEX and the amount of outstanding contracts and where we may be going, and it could be as early as 2015.
Well, I think that what people are going to see are what I call overnight statements and humongous or huge moves. Again, the Chinese are amazing, and I'm not one that slams them because I understand the history of most of the inventions, and I obviously years ago I spent a lot of time studying just what the Chinese invented. Obviously, everyone thinks of gunpowder. They don't know about seismographs. They don't know about toothbrushes, and there's a lot of things they don't know about. This Chinese, one of the most fascinating things, the Chinese invented silk dirigibles fueled by hydrogen. Now, there's one that most people don't know about. But the point I'm trying to say in this is that even amongst, I was once told this by a Russian former spy, and he said this, he said, when you deal, leave enough on the table for everyone, you will live longer, okay? And the Chinese and the Russians are going to enforce, I would say, a legitimacy standard that's the one thing that they're going to produce that's not available, and that's transparency. So as the gold and silver market become transparent, I don't know, is that you, David, moving stuff around in the background, or there's a bunch of noise coming through?
Sorry. No,
okay. Go on mute or whatever when you're doing that, because it's really, it's hard for people to hear, and they always assume it's me. But, I try and mute when I'm off. But the point being is that when they introduce transparency, remember even the promise of the Democrats and the entity in the White House was to be transparent, and it's the least transparent. I think that when we get in the next hour, we'll talk about, because we're just at the top of the hour where we take a break, but I think we need to talk about all the gold that the specific sovereign nations have held out of their countries at the Fed or at the different vaults, and why there's such a stonewalling of the countries forgive me, why there is such a stonewalling with what I would call dumb hyena excuses. Hey, if the gold's there, they should give it back. The only reason they can't give it back is it isn't there. Or give a lame excuse to the Germans that you can't see the gold due to a security matter. Excuse me, we got, multiple billions of dollars worth of gold, and you're telling us we're not good for the security? And again, somebody's making a horrible amount of noise. Doug, is that on your end or David's end?
No.
Okay.
Not on our end.
Yeah. Hey, David, if you can mute. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Well, anyway.
Anything anymore.
Okay. Well, again, there's something maybe somebody's screwing with the broadcast, and that always happens. So when we come back, let's address the fact that what it's going to say to the rest of the world. We'll take the break, Doug. Is that okay? What it's going to say to the rest of the world when someone, okay, let's just say this, or when it becomes transparently known that all of the countries, or the majority, and I know that the Dutch got 100, tons back. That's nothing. When it's known that the whole world's gold has been pilfered, lent out, sold off, leased out, and all those things that they've done. In essence, that we stole everybody's gold. I think that's going to be more than problematic. So go ahead, Doug. Let's take the break, and we'll come back, and then we'll turn it over to Dave with that question.
All right. With that, we'll go to our quick commercial break from our sponsors. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, November 24th, 2014, with Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com and David Morgan, his website, silver-investor.com. Also, the Morgan Report, the newsletter by David Morgan. We'll be right back for 2 more hours with these gentlemen. Stay with us.
Hi, folks. Doug Hagmann here. Thanksgiving is this week. Can you believe it? My goodness, time does fly. Now, if you want to impress your family, your friends over this Thanksgiving holiday, and I'm not even sure if we've got the time to share, they've got the time to ship it out. Folks, visit honest-to-goodness-toffee.com. Not coffee, but toffee, like English toffee. I got to tell you, this is an amazing dessert to complement the same old pumpkin pie. Now is the time to order honest-to-goodness toffee. Ladies and gentlemen, I have never tasted anything like this gourmet English toffee. And I'm not a toffee guy, but I got to tell you, it's worth its weight in silver, as long as we're talking about silver, and even perhaps worth its weight in gold. Pure milk chocolate, hand-tossed and chopped almonds, organic butter, pure cane sugar. There's no artificial anything in this. This is handmade in small batches. It's gluten-free. There's no artificial colors, no artificial ingredients, no trans fats, no high fructose corn syrup. This is packaged in a number of ways. If you go to honest-to-goodness-toffee.com, that's honest-to-goodness-toffee.com, you can see, for example, and if I can suggest the elegant, and I mean elegant, 2-pound gold gift tin, or for the most toffee for your buck, the best value is the grand slab. It's a grand, giant 2-pound sheet of solid gourmet English toffee that you can proudly display on your own personal platter or tray. A great accent to accompany whatever dessert you might be serving. And even if you can't get it by Thanksgiving, certainly in the days afterwards, what a great crowd pleaser. I mean, this really makes for just a tremendous gift and for a great party serving, if you will. Folks, for Hagmann and Hagmann listeners only, with your first $20 order, you'll receive a free pewter tin filled to the brim with 6 ounces of gourmet English toffee. That's a $15 value. All you have to do is put Hagmann and Hagmann in the comment box when you place your order to receive your gift. So order a gift for a friend or family or a client, or keep the tin for yourself, but do it. It's just fantastic toffee. It really is. It's melt in your mouth goodness. That's honesttogoodnesstoffee.com, honesttogoodnesstoffee.com. Because you know why? Because we do deserve some pleasantries in life, don't we?
Now, please hear me. This is very important. The ultimate power in the United States of America is believing Christians who know their God. And the balance of power can be changed, not on the basis of a numerical majority and not on the basis of economic might or military might or media monopoly or scientific mind control or anything else. The balance of power in the United States right now, the only power sufficient to redirect the perfect storm is the remnant of believing Christians crying out together in repentance and getting really serious with the living God and going into his throne room with a violence. For the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. What does that mean? Cut the wimpy, disgusting, putrid, impotent, pharisaical, religious game playing that Jesus Christ said to the Laodicean church in the book of Revelation, I will vomit you out of my mouth. I will puke you out of my mouth because you are neither hot nor cold. Impotent is what Christ was saying. You're useless is what Christ was saying. But he didn't write them off. He gave them one last chance. He asked them to repent. He asked them to receive the eye salve of the Holy Spirit so their vision could be restored and they could see the true nature of what was happening all around them. And he called them. Jesus Christ called them. He said he was going to clothe them. Notice the words clothe them. As he set them on fire, because they would only be useful to the degree they stopped being cold or hot and were set on fire. So in a very brief summary here, I want to ask every single person listening, I want to ask you this question as your brother in Christ. Certainly no better than any of you and most likely worse in the flesh than all of you. I ask you this. Can you say before God that you have taken responsibility for the perfect storm that is about to destroy this nation on a level that is too horrific to describe? Have you taken ownership of it? Or are you playing games? Are you dancing around the golden calf? Is that what you're doing, dancing around the golden calf? Because I'm telling you right now, all hell's about ready to break loose. And if you can't see it, it's because you're too busy looking at the golden calf.
You want answers? I think I can tell you one. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special Monday edition of the Hagmann Report. It's Monday, the 24th day of November 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann. In studio with Joe Hagmann, our very special guest tonight, Mr. Steve Quayle, and also Mr. David Morgan. Both websites, stevequayle.com and silver-investor.com, linked off of hagmanandhagmann.com. The folks, tonight, of course, we're waiting on the Ferguson grand jury decision. It's no longer about the decision. The facts don't matter. Honestly, when we get right down to it, the stage is being set for something much bigger, and of course, this plays right in, or this does dovetail right into what Mr. Morgan's talking about, what Steve Quayle has been talking about for not just this program, but for decades. And with that, Steve, I'm going to toss it back to you. Take it away, sir, and thank you for doing so.
Well, you're welcome, Doug, and greetings, everyone. With me is Dave Morgan of themorganreport.com. Longtime friend. We've known each other for decades, literally been on talk radio a number of times. Then David got busy, went his way, I went my way, but he listened to me and I read his stuff. So we're back on the radio. David, it's simple. If there was the gold that existed, that's been deposited in the United States depositories, why is there so much stonewalling in your opinion? Why can't they just even allow the Germans? You probably saw the Hokie statement. It was a security concern. If there were any more Bravo Sierra, it would be on another planet and would be called Planet of the Bull, and all there would be bulls and what followed after the bulls eating some interplanetary or galactic goop. So the planet of BS. What is your take on this, and how do you see it as playing out? And simply, literally, when do people get it? And what would be the response in your opinion? When people finally realize it's gone.
Oh, great question. A little background. I think everyone is aware, maybe some aren't, because they may be just catching on to this, meaning, the honest money movement or how important gold is played in the monetary system. But Germany basically has 674 tons of gold with the Federal Reserve, and they want it back. And so far they have received 5 tons out of the 674 back. And what happened was, when they asked for it, there's 2 schools of thought on this. We talk to the banking elite, which I do. I mean, I look at all aspects. The banks, the Deutsche Bank, will say, well, it's no big deal. We don't really want it back. Well, why would they say that? Well, because they're part of the paper paradigm. They're trying to obfuscate the whole situation and make light of it. But the truth is that the German government asked to visit the Fed vaults to inventory the gold and determine its actual existence. But the Fed refused to permit Germany to examine its own gold. The reasons given, as you said several times on this show, were security and no room for visitors. Talk about Bravo Sierra and nothing else. Those are the 2 excuses, security and no room for visitors. I think that goes from the BS meter and pegs it. Germany finally did send some staff to the Fed, and they were permitted only into the vault's anteroom, where they were shown 5 or 6 gold bars as representative of their holdings, and they were permitted nothing else. So this is unbelievable. Now, the follow-on question you asked me, Steve, is, what would happen? And this has been something that's been in my head since I was a much younger man. And I always had kind of this, I guess I'll call it a dream, I won't call it a vision, that if or when what I call sleepy Americanus woke up to the fact that there's no gold in Fort Knox, that would be the tipping point where people said, "Oh my goodness, this is," that would be the tipping point where things just blew apart. I'm not so sure anymore. After being in this thing for decades and studying it and continue to study it, I think people are so dumbed down and so distracted that, as you said with the Kyle Bass interview, saying, the dollar's going to zero and telling people blatantly. I think if you stood up and said, Congress has audited the gold holdings at Fort Knox, and there isn't any. And in West Point, they have 4 bars left that belong to the U.S. Treasury, and that's it. I think people have a big yawn. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. But I'm not so sure anymore, Steve, and I'm sure you might have some comments. Before I move on, I just want to back up a little bit and give some monetary information to all of the listeners of this show. And that is that, we've talked gold, and a lot of silver too. But I want people to understand that the monetary metal of history is silver, not gold. Gold is always used as a power play. It's the elite's money. It is nation state to nation state. Remember, when gold was confiscated in the United States in 1933 by the Roosevelt administration, it was illegal for Americans to own gold, but yet it was used for international settlement. I mean, the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement, after World War II, the reason on a U.S. dollar standard was it was as good as gold. I'm old enough to remember good as gold, sound as a dollar, because they were interchangeable until August 15, 1971. So basically, we're on an international gold standard that was settled in U.S. dollars, again, because the dollar was backed by gold for a while. But coming back to silver, silver is the monetary metal of the people. If you really want power to the people, you do it on a silver standard, and the best form of a monetary standard is competing currencies in modern times, in my view. But if you go back to more ancient times, it's a trimetallic standard. It's copper, silver, and gold, where the market sets the ratio between them and not some edict by a man saying that 16 ounces of silver is equal to 1 ounce of gold. You don't want that. You want the market to determine which is most valuable in whatever given location for ever given reasons. But if I can just take it a little longer on, in my lifetime, the standard changed officially in 1965 when the Treasury stopped minting 90% silver coins. But I'm holding in my hand a silver certificate, and people that want to follow along can take out what we refer to as a dollar bill out of their wallet and look at it compared to what I'm going to read you off the silver certificate. But the first thing at the top of it is it says silver certificate. It doesn't say Federal Reserve note. And under that it says this certifies that there has been deposited in the Treasury of, in great bold letters, the United States of America, and under Washington's picture says $1 silver payable to the bearer on demand. Now, I want to be very clear that this is actually what a note should be. It's a claim check. It's not money itself, but it's a claim on money. Because at one time you could take the silver certificate to any bank, and it says right on this thing that certifies that there's a silver dollar on deposit. And a dollar is a specific weight. A dollar is not a piece of paper. A dollar is 371.2 fine grains of 999 fine silver. That is the definition of a dollar. It's a weight. And the Treasury can't even get it right anymore because there's more than that in a Silver Eagle that says $1 on it. But it's actually much greater than, it's about 25% greater than what an official dollar is. So when the Treasury minted dollars in 1986 in the Silver Eagle program, they didn't even read the Constitution to find out how many grains of fine silver should go in one. So you're actually getting paid more than $1 when you buy a Silver Eagle by about a 25% factor. But I digress. The point being is that people should know something about monetary history, and I'd be remiss if I wouldn't be doing a service that I feel that I'm called to do for everyone listening to the Hagmann Report tonight, or maybe in a later broadcast, that the monetary metal of history is really silver, not gold. It's been used more often, more places, in far more transactions for the average person out there than gold ever has. Gold to me is important, and gold is used as an international settlement. I don't argue that. But really, to have a just and fair monetary system, I think you need to have at least a bimetallic, if not a trimetallic standard. So I just wanted to say that. Circling back to the German gold situation, I mean, it's absolutely pathetic. And to sit there and make such light, make a light thing out of something that's so important. And I'm just going to move on a little bit further, Steve, because this is really kind of an emotional issue.
David?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
David?
Yes.
Let me interrupt you just for a minute because right now the decision came out, the breaking news on Ferguson, that the grand jury does not indict the police officer. There is no indictment of the police officer. So Darren Wilson, was not indicted for murder or involuntary manslaughter. That news just broke. And so let's go ahead, because I didn't want to interrupt you at a later date, especially when you got to a really important point that, this is really important. And continue. I'm sorry, but that's the news. It just broke.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. No, that's very important. Everyone's aware of it. So my point is that I have not been traveling much internationally to speak on the precious metals and the problem with the monetary system as I was, just say, a few years ago. But I still get invited to Germany because if there's one country that really gets the monetary issues, the Germans. And that's because they suffered during the Weimar Republic in 1923 with a complete hyperinflation. So they understand what can happen to a paper currency system. And they really, really get the silver story, and they really, really get the gold story. So that's my point, is that if there's any nationality or nation state, is probably a better way to phrase it, that gets the idea of why sound money is so important, it's the Germans. And yet they're the ones that are standing for delivery of their gold and getting all of this, BS as referred to, which is very, very true. So that, to me, when it first happened, I thought that would be the beginning of a tipping point. I really thought that, naively, now looking back on it, that would be enough and could get enough momentum to really start forcing the issue. But no. Things just keep going on and on and on. Of course, Deutsche Bank comes into the picture and says, well, we really don't need it. We'll wait 7 years. What's the big deal? Of course, that's not how the German people feel about it at all. And, of course, I just went over what they did, to come in there and security reasons, and there's no room for visitors. Are you kidding me? And, of course, they've received 5 tons out of, 674 tons. I mean, this is really pathetic.
I think that it's important that people understand this, that there's going to be another issue, and I want to deal with this. Obviously, as a Christian, I've been talking for years about this, not from a standpoint of, quote, hawking wares, but there's a disconnect, David. People will say they're not trusting God if you buy gold and silver, and I want to get this out in the open because I always get this after interviews like this. Yet they'll carry Federal Reserve notes, they'll invest in systems that are rife and absolutely riddled with theft and unjust measures, which, by the way, the Bible says are an abomination before God, and yet they won't take personal responsibility or accountability. One time it really troubled me about a decade ago, and it was troubling me why people won't take control of their own finances, yet they'll trust somebody to, handle their money for them, and I think I got an answer through prayer. It's because people don't want to take accountability or responsibility, that basically it absolves them of anything that might happen to their money. In other words, they'd rather have someone else lose it instead of stand in faith that they might. And even in the book of Daniel, it talks about with the rise of Antichrist, he's going to accept gold and silver and precious jewels, and then they'll quote the scripture, they'll throw their gold and silver in the street. That's at the literal day of the Lord. And I've researched this for so many decades, but there are new listeners, that's why I want to cover it. So you said something about just measures, and that's a big deal in the kingdom of God, because a just measure is exactly that. It's an unjust measure. Obviously you just said that $1913 worth 4 cents. Obviously 1 ounce of gold in 1913, is worth today 40 times what it was in those days, and at one point is worth almost 65 times 3 years ago. So I think that there is a built-in, and I know there's a built-in bias, to divorce people from personal accountability and responsibility. And so when they invest, let's say, in the paper markets with whatever brokers, XYZ, they know that take 1,000 shares of Apple, they have no clue how many block sales of Apple stock can be bought and sold, including theirs, because it's held in the street name, meaning it's held in the broker's name, versus being held in individual accounts. And so, I think it's imperative that people understand that you made a statement, and it's been true. Silver is the money of the people. And with the amount of silver that's out there, if everybody panics, and I've watched it happen, I've been at this long enough to recognize the fact that when everybody panics, it's like futility in my mind, because they wait until they get their clue from someone else, and it all then boils down to, I've got to get it before everyone else does. Meanwhile, now we're on the radio, and just for the date, it's November 24th, 2014. There are shortages in the pipeline. The U.S. Mint is on allocation, and we've seen, David, and we got to address this too. Without naming names, you and I are familiar with some of the biggest names in the coin business in the last decade, and the ones that have the glossy pages and the big notes, and they always basically, promise one thing but hold people's money, and then they don't deliver the silver and gold, and that's happening more and more. I personally know one man that I went to a seminar in Hawaii with, sat with him across the table. It was courtesy of one of the metals dealers that I used to deal with, actually a distributor, and he basically ended up with $80 million in other people's money and declared bankruptcy. Well, let's talk about that. And we don't have to name names, but you've seen it too. You've seen some of the, we've been at this, David, long enough to see what happens. And that's, address that if you would, because delivery is everything. Delivery is everything. Timely delivery is everything. And I think there's a disconnect there too. And one guy, and this is a true story, ordered from a specific dealer, called me after 6 months, wanted me to do something for him, and I said, why didn't you buy from me in the first place? Well, this guy was $10 cheaper. I said, was he $10 cheaper? I said, how much have you spent in legal fees? Oh, $25,000. So I think that's really critical, and you've seen it, have you not? And again, that's
Absolutely.
what people got to. Yeah, go ahead and give your 2 cents on that.
Sure, I want to do that, but before I do, Steve, I made some notes while you were talking. And one, I want to add on to what you said about people taking responsibility. And it seems we live in the era of name, shame, and blame. I'm not responsible for my feelings. It was I had a bad mother, or I've got this complex because of a bad teacher. I mean, people do not take responsibility anymore, and that again goes back to the moral structure and the debasement of currency. And I'm not saying everything is based on the debasement of currency. I read the Collapse of Complex Societies, and it was an academic read. It was a little tough to get through it. And there's lots of reasons that society's collapsed, but you could certainly put the monetary factor into most of them. But coming on point is, as you said, and I'll quote you as best I can, Steve, is that people would rather hand their money over to somebody else and lose it than take responsibility for their own self. Now, my comment on that is, one, I agree with it, which is very sad. And secondly, that I've never advocated put all of your money in gold and silver. I never have. I'm in the investing rules book. I was asked to write for that, for the section on silver investing. And this book has got Sir John Templeton and all these big, big names, certainly not some little character like me. I'm in it, but I mean, there's some really big names in there. Kyle Bass quality, he's not in the book, but that talk about all kinds of investments. So anything you think about, mutual fund stocks, limited partnerships, annuities, life insurance, pension funds, go on and on. Everything is covered, and everyone has the 10 rules of investing in that particular item. When I wrote that, the 10th rule was too much of a good thing can be too much. No one wants to be a prophet of doom, but in a collapse scenario, having a 10% allocation to the metals is sufficient for most people. And a few years before the Iraq War, or the Mideast wars, back under the original Herbert Walker Bush 1, I said war is on the horizon, and I recommended a 20% allocation. So I want to be clear on that I think you don't have to go all in, but you certainly need to have some. That, I think, is an imperative. So that was point number one. Point number two, Steve, that you made was about seeing what happens in a panic top. And I was there on Silver Boulevard looking at Superior Coins in Los Angeles when the first peak happened. And I saw those people on the street with candelabras and anything you can think of that were either buying or selling. And a lot of transactions went on the street, person to person, before they ever made it into the dealer. And that was just one of several dealers, not only on Sepulveda Boulevard, but all over the country. And what I want people to think about is that was a panic top in 1980 when there was 2 billion ounces of silver available for investment. Today there's only 1 billion. There weren't any hedge funds that bought commercial bars for investment back then that there are now. Yes, Hunt did buy some commercial bars for investment. He was basically the only one with a few partners. But that was small relative to what the market has today. And it was a U.S. phenomenon only. It was basically America only. Now it's a global market, and it's a global problem. So if that's a panic top when there was twice as much silver available and it was restricted to 5% of the world's population, think of what it will do when there's half that much silver available and it's 100% of the world's population. I think you're catching my drift. Now, to come back to the question you asked, Steve, buying these ideas about saving pennies on the dollar, there was an ad at the top, near the top of the market last time, and I'm old enough to have been through, this market and obviously the one prior to it. And there was full-page ads in a lot of the major newspapers, Los Angeles Times being one of many, Dallas, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, you name it, Florida. I mean, they were all over the place. And it said, buy gold at spot. and it was International Gold Bullion Exchange. You might remember this one, Steve. I don't know.
Yes, I do.
So International Gold Bullion Exchange put out these full-page ads, and people loved it because they wanted to save the dealer markup of, of 3% or whatever, 3 to 5. It varies on the dealer. And so they're investing a lot of hard-earned money into the gold and silver markets, primarily gold, because they can save a few dollars. And what would happen is you would send your money in for your gold coins, and you'd immediately get a letter back that says, if you allow us to store your gold for free, we will pay you 1% a month on your gold. Isn't that a great deal? And people are so foolish or greedy, they would do it. Not only would they do it, they'd tell their friends, wow, gold's a bad, what I don't like about gold is you don't make any interest on it, but International Gold Bullion Exchange will pay you to store your gold. Isn't that great? And so this thing caught on like wildfire. Well, one of the regulators, if not more than one, caught wind of this by some complaints because, like any Ponzi scheme, some of the people said, this sounds a little too good to be true. I think it's time for me to get my gold. So what happened is these characters took mahogany, which is one of the hardest woods out there, and gold-plated it. And the exact size of what you would see in a commercial gold bar. And they filled this vault, and they might have had 2 legitimate bars. I don't know that part of the story. I do know the mahogany bars being gold-plated. And they showed this vault, and they basically got away with it for a while because they opened up this vault, looked good. They didn't pick up the wood. They just looked at it. It's like maybe they handed them one legit bar. I don't know about that. I'm not making it up. I'm just telling you I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did. And then that even legitimized it further. So even more people pulled into this scam. And that was one of the worst ones that I know about. There were several others, and there's a lot that happened on the silver side as well. So, Mike Maloney, myself, Steve Quayle, many say if you can't touch it, you don't own it. I mean, I understand there's people of very high net worth that maybe buy such large quantities that they do need to store some. And if that's the case, you can consult with Steve. You can consult with me. And Steve, if you'll allow me, I want to digress a little bit. Now, I got to do this carefully because I've got to protect the anonymity of the person that did this. But at the bottom of the market in 2008, I got a phone call for a consultation. And the consultation went like this. This very high-powered individual said to me, do you know Bill Gross? And I said, well, I know of Bill Gross. I don't know him personally, no. He goes, well, I was with Bill Gross yesterday, and today I'm calling you, and I want to buy X amount of silver. Now, that right there implies something, and I'm going to let the listener go any direction they want to, because, to me it means something. To the listener it may mean something else, and I'm not going to tell you what I think about that, other than it was a vast thing of silver. And then he made the following statement. He says, I don't want to see it. I don't want to touch it, but I want to know it's there. I trust you, David. I want to know whom do I buy it from and whom do I store it with. And I asked him one question. I said, where do you want to store it? Do you want to store it domestically or foreignly? And he told me, and I'm going to leave that vague because I want to keep this, as anonymous as possible. And this is hearsay. I understand that, and you can believe me or not. And so I met his demand as far as, who, what, where, and why, and fulfilled that order. Now, this individual, Steve, and listeners, was about as far up the food chain in the financial system as you can get. Now, you can imagine that Bill Gross doesn't just welcome anybody off the street and say, oh, come on in and let's have a chat about the bond market. But this individual was there. And the next day, he called me and asked for some guidance as far as where he knew what he wanted to buy. There was no question. I didn't pitch him on silver. He's convinced. And that's what took place. And I got off the phone, and I thought, how interesting. I wonder how many of the underlings that work for him, work in that institution, are being told, what he's doing. And the answer is probably zero. But I say that to make a point. And the point goes to Greg Hunter. And Greg is someone that's come on, I wouldn't say late in the scene, but certainly not early in the scene like Steve Quayle. And Greg has a saying that you'll either have it or you won't. And I agree with that. I've adopted that. I think the day will come this time in this bull market where you either have it or you don't have it. And there'll be a lot of people with their IGBE, the International Gold Bullion Exchange, I'm trying to be somewhat humorous here, that have a piece of paper from some entity that they really trust, like one of these big bank names on a really nice looking piece of paper with some script around the edges and looking some foil stamp and something looks really, really pretty. But when they go to exchange it for real metal, they're like in line with 5,000 other people that aren't going to get it. So be careful, people. And you don't need to put your life savings in silver. You don't need to put, anything close to it. But there can be, I think there will be a day. And thanks, Steve, for what you said about throwing gold and silver in the street. I get that too. And, it's just an excuse to be lazy, I think. Certainly we know where our faith should be. I mean, I have an expression that it's what you have, it's not what you have. What does that mean? Well, it means it's what you have in your head and your heart and what kind of walk you have, not how much external wealth you have. But you know what? We live in a material world and we have to be smart about it. We don't want to, and you probably know a biblical quote, Steve, and it'd be beneficial at this point probably throw it out there. I'm not nearly as skilled at that topic as you, but we've got to be smart in the times we're living in. And if you can't see what's right in front of you because you're, too busy looking at your iPad or, the latest fashions on TV or something, I almost want to say you get what you deserve because it's come down to this name, shame, and blame. It's always an excuse. I'm never responsible for anything. And yet you have people like the Hagmann Show that give out this information for free. I mean, they've got sponsors and all that. I mean, these are dedicated men, dedicated women that have dedicated their lives to the benefit and service of others, and yet we largely get ignored, except, a few that gather and understand what's really going on. Steve, I just want to turn it back to you. I've got to take a breath here because I'll tell you, I'm getting a little bit emotional at this point in the program because this thing has been my life's calling, the way I see it. And it gets frustrating, especially with these markets being as beat up as they have for the last 4 years. You sit here and still try to carry the message because the message is still valid.
One of the things that I'm pondering in my heart right now is with the mark of the beast coming, and that is a biblical term, Revelation, chapter 13. The thing is that we're at a time period where does a person put their money? Because everything is cross-collateralized. By the way, David, I remember when I said before anybody, and I'm just saying this is a matter of record. For the record, when I said that the derivatives market was a quadrillion-dollar problem, when most people are saying, it's barely, multi-hundred billions, if not approaching a trillion. I got to tell you something. You'd think I was the best stand-up comedian in the world because I got laughs beyond laughs and ridicule beyond scorn. That's a good statement. The point, I just hit myself with another good statement. The point being is that history has proved me right. Now, here's what I want to say. Liar's paper is so cross-collateralized, and with the death of the America's middle class, I'm on record as saying the middle class is over. My budget 360, some of the Dr. Housing bubble. There are so many, Gerald Celente, there are so many people that can produce that statement and have all the charts and graphs to follow it up, money in the bank savings. Look at all the people that are going to college. And their kids are going to college, are going to come out with anywhere between $50,000 to $70,000 in debt, and 70% of the graduates aren't even finding jobs in the field that they graduated in. My answer to that is become a painter, a plumber, an electrician, get a skill, and even a mechanic. In Bozeman, Montana, I'm just giving this out, I know what it is in other parts of the country, the mechanics are getting $95 an hour. And then, you're talking to electricians, and depending on master electricians, and I have no problems with these prices. All I'm saying is that the average person can't afford it. Without the ability to double or even triple your money people are losing. I can say this. I used to say, you've heard me rail on this, I'm sure. This is the other one I get all the time. Well, you can't eat gold. I can take 1 ounce of gold to Argentina right now, okay? And I'll use Argentina as an example. $8.50, $10 buys you the best steak dinner and all the stuff that goes along with it. So I can eat in Argentina 120 meals, and I'm not saying I'd eat steak every day, but what I'm saying is that the point is I can eat 2 meals a day for 60 days on that 1 ounce of gold. At one point, I could eat 90 days on 1 ounce of gold. So I categorically reject it. Now let's talk about silver. Silver is in such short supply. When I make my calls weekly, I call everybody I know, and I tell people this. I want to clarify something. If you're going to leave the country, then obviously you want to store your metals offshore. Because, and right now, every place that I know and all of my big clients and clients that live in Bozeman, Montana with, some of the biggest wealth in the world, they're all going to Singapore. The man that invented cell phones lives in Bozeman. He gets a penny for every, a penny for every cell phone call made. I won't give out his name, but he lives here. So the point is, we got some high-dollar people. Talking to the people that move in those circles, they've all gone to Singapore. So here's my statement, because I'm getting an email. If you're going to leave the country and you know that you know that you know, then it's best to get it overseas as quickly as possible. Legally, I might add. Legally. But the point is that if you're not going to leave the country, then if you can't touch it, you don't own it. And, the thing that I'm troubled about is that when you've got silver being, what right now is the cost to produce 1 ounce of silver, David Morgan, and 1 ounce of gold? And then I'll take it right back, because I want people to understand something.
Yeah, we did a study on that, and round numbers, it varies mine to mine, but the average primary silver producer is around $22 an ounce, and gold's around $1,400 an ounce. Okay.
And that's to extract it, pay everything. So we're talking about something in silver, anywhere from $18, $19, 21 American Eagle, for American Eagles. And I told people on my website today, look, American Eagles, and I'm using this as an illustration, are getting tough. There's only probably, 6 or 8 primary dealers for U.S. Silver Eagles and gold in the country. And the problem is that, and I'm talking specifically now, American gold, the problem is they're on allocation. When we had the hit in silver, I think it was 1,425,000 1 ounce silver eagles sold in that one day alone. So we're seeing day sales that used to equal month sales in the old days. So people are taking advantage of this. But again, all of the my answers to the people that ask, and by the way, I always considered you way too conservative. I personally believe that paper is definitely liar's paper, and I believe that when things start to go down really quickly, IRAs, TOs, 401ks will be nationalized. We saw Nancy Pelosi doing it. And so, there are ways to hold metals. But then a question I got for you is, the mining stocks have been hit. And the idea that it takes $1,400 an ounce just to produce something, the miners, and you probably know the heads of most of these mines, all they would have to do is say for 1 year, if they've got the operating capital to do it, we're not going to sell any of the metals into the market, and the same thing for the silver market, silver miners and the Silver Miners Association. And that's when the paper facade would break wide open. Have you actually told them to do that?
Yeah, great comment. And if I can give some background, and I will. One of the best gold companies out there is a company called Gold Corp. And Gold Corp, when they started, they have a very, very rich gold mine. What they did was they actually mined gold, and they kept back a lot of the bullion in their vault as part of their holdings. So a lot of conservative investors loved that stock because it represented not only a mining company, but an actual strong participation in the gold bullion that was in the vault of the company. So in other words, you had a bullion and a mining investment with one share of stock, or 10 or 100, whatever. And I thought it was brilliant. Rob McEwen, a legend, a living legend in the mining business, was the head of Goldcorp at the time. And he and I were at the same conference in Chicago, and I cornered him more or less and asked him, we really need to get this going on the silver side, where a company is that enlightened to realize their product, what it really represents, and hold some production. And this is, again, a very, very good way. So the years have gone by. Rob has left Goldcorp and gone into and done several other things. He's still very important in the mining industry. But it's something that it's extremely difficult to convince any of the power brokers in the mining industry at large to come on board with. And there's several reasons for that. The main reason is that the banking elite debt finance most of these mines. So you've got to take the paper paradigm in order to get the, I'll call it capital, in order to put the facility in to start mining in the first place. Well, now once you do that or accept their debt, you're now beholden to them basically until that debt is paid off. So it's really difficult for a lot of these mining situations to be able to stand on their, on their 2 feet and say, this is money, we're holding it off the market, and that type of thing. I agree in principle. I think it's a great thing to do. It has been done by Goldcorp. On the silver side, it has been done by Silver Standard. It has been done by Endeavor Mines. And recently it's been done by First Majestic. So certainly it happens on the silver side as well as on the gold side. And I think it's a valiant effort. The point I'm making is that it's very difficult to get a rather large consortium of them to do it at the same time. Now, while we're on the mining industry, I'm going to take a question that came into the show. And it says, I have a burning question about a company called Kimber Resources. Why did the board, including some wise precious metals investors, sell for a penny on dollar at the bottom of the market last year? Before I answer that, let me give you some background. I did own Kimber Resources. We actually had it on one of the lists in the Morgan report. We didn't like the way the company or stock was acting, and we sold it at a profit. We're not afraid to take a profit on these stocks. We don't get it right all the time, but we get it right probably more than a lot of them out there in this industry. So I haven't followed Kimber since the time we sold it, really. So I really can't answer why. And why it gets into, motivation. I mean, there's lots of reasons in a why question that really it's a very tough one to ask and get a really good answer, even from someone such as myself that would really want to tell you from the head and heart why, when I don't know what the motivations behind the company was and what the individuals that sold were. So I really don't have an answer. Sorry. Thanks for writing. Certainly you can ask me anything, but all I can do is tell you I really don't know. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in this industry sort of behind the scenes that would be a great wake-up call to many that are unsophisticated about some of the happenings. And it's not just the mining business. I mean, Steve has said it well. I mean, this whole system is corrupt. I mean, I don't want to expand this conversation too big a degree, but I mean, not only is the financial system corrupt, the water supply is corrupt, the food supply is corrupt, the political system is corrupt. I mean, there isn't anything on the planet, I don't want to be Mr. Doom and Gloom, but the last thing I want to say before I turn it back over to Steve is, Steve, you're right, as far as am I too conservative saying 10 or 20%. Certainly I am much higher than that personally. The reason I give out those numbers is that it suits a lot of people in what I call the mainstream the best, because they don't believe to the level that you and I believe or know is going to happen at the financial system. They have a false belief of what's called a normalcy bias, that tomorrow's going to be like today, and even if it gets real bad, they're not going to be able to fill up their tank every week. They'll have to go to every other week. I mean, they have a really it's a non sequitur to them. They don't understand. They don't travel the world. They don't see real poverty. They think that 5% of the world's population, i.e. the United States, is their worldview. And they get everything off the propaganda press, and they believe it. And all they really need to do is to go into some of these South American countries and go to one of these mining camps for about a month and then go out in the streets of the local town for that same month and get a real education on what's really going on in the world. But a lot of these people don't. They get all their information off of the boob tube, and they think they really have it figured out. When the great comeuppance happens, they're going to figure out in a big hurry that they had a very, very distorted view of what really goes on the globe, and that's going to be something of what's coming in. I think the not too distant future. In fact, it could be as early as next year.
Yeah, Steve, if I can interject, Steve, can I interject something here? I got a question.
Absolutely.
Okay. I've got a question here. Here we are now. What you said, Mr. Morgan, the net cost basically to get out of the ground, refine, and produce, and to present. For example, 1 ounce of silver is $22. 1 ounce of gold is $1,400. We're seeing the spot price, but obviously we're not going to get it for the spot price. We're seeing the price is much lower than that. My first question, my first question is, how long can the gold and silver prices stay where they're at right now? That's question number one. And then question number two is, not too long ago, and this is kind of somewhat related, I was looking at Zero Hedge, and I think Max Kaiser, who you referenced, was talking about this, buy a silver coin, destroy J.P. Morgan. We know that between HSBC and J.P. Morgan, they manipulate the prices of gold and silver. What would happen, and could we make this happen, and if we could, should we, what would happen too if we decided to take delivery, if anyone holding the paper, and I'm not even sure I'm not in this world, so I don't know how to even ask this, but if everyone wanted to buy gold and silver, or went out and bought a coin or 2 or 10 or 20 or whatever, or asked for delivery, could we crash the system? So there's two different questions. How long on the first one, and then could we crash the system and make J.P. Morgan, HSBC pay for their sins?
Excellent questions, Doug, and thank you for that. Question number one, how long will these mines stay in business and produce at a loss? And that, not to be cute, the real truthful answer is it depends on the mine, which mining company we're talking about. I didn't know this the first time around. I mean, I keep learning more all the time. What I discovered was that it's actually a business decision, an economic viable decision to run a mine at a loss for a number of months rather than shut down as soon as prices are underwater. And the reason being is that mines are almost a living entity. A lot of hard rock mines especially are underground, and they accumulate water, and the water has to be pumped out. And it's like an automobile in a way that there's a lot of machinery that it does better when it's run, 5 days a week out of 7 and maintained than when you walk away. Because once you walk away, it's difficult, especially depending on how long you leave it on care and maintenance, to get it functioning again. On top of that, a lot of these companies are held in jurisdictions such as Mexico or South America, but the company itself is Canadian, as an example. And some, not all, but some of the contracts stipulate that if you shut down, you have to give 6 months severance pay to all the workers. Or there's a penalty to the government itself if you're a Canadian-based company working in Mexico. It could be stipulated by contract that if you shut down the mine, you owe X amount of money to the Mexican government. So there's lots of reasons to continue to mine at a loss in their economic decisions. So there isn't a clear-cut answer, Doug, as far as how long. What I can say is this: it doesn't go on forever. And it is a decision that can be made. It's kind of like a break-even analysis. These companies know, and again, you have to go individual by individual, that at 7 months out from, $1,400, once you're below $1,400 for gold, as an example, 7 months from now, we're just as soon smart to close down and go on care and maintenance as we are to continue to mine. So it's that type of thing, and again, it varies company to company. But they cannot operate at a loss forever. That's common sense. Will they continue? Yes, for a while. How much longer? We don't know. I'd say generally a rule of thumb, which is probably what you're looking for. I'd say for a gold mine, roughly a year. And I'd say for a silver mine, depending on what the other products are, because there's no such thing as a pure silver mine in existence. They're all base metal and silver mines. So depending on if it's a copper silver mine or a lead zinc silver mine or a zinc silver mine, that type of thing, it would be a variable. But again, a year is probably a good round number. So coming on your second question about taking delivery, I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. I've never done this, so it's a first for the Hagmann Show. A lot of this has been a first. A lot of Steve's questions and what he brings out of me is better than some of the interviews I do. Or let's see,
Steve's the man.
I do a lot of them, and so I'm going to give you a little history on Max Keiser. Now you can take this any way you want, but I was in France on one of my tours talking to a bunch of fund managers, and I was invited to meet Max and Stacy in their studio. And so I, was in my normal suit to, meet with some of these people that I deal with. And I went up there, and Max, put me on live on the show. I think we did 2 segments, if I remember correctly. And it is really hard to keep a straight face around Max Keiser. I'll tell you, he is such a comedian and such a quick wit, and it was just amazing. So we did these couple of shoots. And it was around lunchtime, and they were taking a break, and Max and I went across the street to a little cafe and had a latte or whatever, some coffee. And we were discussing the silver market primarily, and we were getting to know each other a little bit better, live, because we knew each other from the internet, but not, hadn't been in each other's presence. And we were talking about the leverage in the silver market, and I said, well, leverage works both ways. If you have, for an example, 100-to-1 leverage, I go, every time you take an ounce of silver off the market, you basically deleverage at 100-to-1. Now, I'm not saying I had anything to do with this, but what I do know for a fact is shortly after we had that conversation, Max came out with this idea of, buy an ounce of silver, destroy J.P. Morgan. Now, those are his words, not mine, and I'm not sure I quoted him exactly right, but I think most people that know Max Keiser understand what I just said, and that was that for a long time he was campaigning out there saying, buy silver and basically have an effect on J.P. Morgan. So the answer that, and you asked essentially the same thing, Doug, and the answer is yes. I did a video which you can look up, you can probably Google it. It's called The Great Silver Market Myth. I think that's the exact title, The Great Silver Market Myth. And it's one of my pet peeves. And my pet peeves is the dealer industry, and I know many of these dealers on a first-name basis, and not all of them are guilty of this, but many of them are. And especially the ones that were around in the first bull market in the 1970s that peaked January 21st, 1980, and are still in that business. And what they'll say is, well, I think everyone should own a little. And so what they're really saying, at least the way I see it, is that, gold and silver aren't really that big a deal, but it's not a bad idea to have a little bit of it because, it's a good idea to have some, okay? So I took that name, that idea, everyone should own a little, when I made this video. And what I did in that video was I said, well, let's take this and let's look at it objectively. Let's drill down and think about this. Let's do some critical thinking. What if everyone owned a little? How do you define little? I mean, it's an ambiguous term. So I'm going to define little. I'm going to define little as meaning 2 ounces of silver. And there's a reason for this, and you'll see that in a minute. And I said, let's take everyone. I go, well, the world population's pushing, 7 billion people? But let me just say, in my experiment, my thought experiment, that we're looking at 5% of the world's population. That's the population of the United States, 350 million. So if everyone, that's everyone in the United States, only 5% of the total, bought a little, 2 ounces, that would be 700 million ounces of silver. And that is basically what is produced annually out of the mining industry, total. And that comes primarily from base metal mines, not silver mines. Silver mines only produce about 25% of the supply. So that would mean that 5% of the population of the world bought up a little, 2 ounces, and you wiped out the entire silver supply. Now let's think that through. But what if the world woke up? So what's going to happen, in my very studied view, is that when the panic begins, and no one knows exactly when, since there's less than 1% of the global population that even thinks of owning gold and silver, some of that 1% own it in a form that really doesn't have backing of the physical metal, but has a certificate that claims that they own it, or a claim check on it, still living in the paper paradigm, believing that they own something that doesn't exist. If that were to double to 2% of the population, in other words, leaving out 98% on the sidelines because they don't know about it or don't care about it, that alone, that doubling of that teeny little bitty market, would have a phenomenal effect on the price of gold and silver. I mean, phenomenal. And that's what I'm looking at. I think when the panic begins, going again back to Greg Hunter, you're either going to own it or you don't. And there's going to be a panic buy, and when the word gets out that I didn't get delivery or my delivery is delayed, and we've already seen this. Steve could talk about this. We've already seen this in the 2008 bottom, where people were buying. There was very little retail. There was a shortage in retail product. There wasn't a shortage in commercial bars, but there was a shortage in 100-ounce bars, 10-ounce bars, rounds, silver eagles, any type of silver product in the retail side. There was a shortage. The price was $9 on the COMEX, but it was $13.50 in the retail market. So will it have an effect? Absolutely. When? I can't tell you, but I know the day is getting closer and closer as we speak. And Steve, you might want to comment further on what I said.
Sure. I think a great a great illustration of that is India. Now, I'm really, Dave, watching India as a hawk, because they've got some screwy laws there. You know, they've got limitations what you can have. They have a 25% tariff on gold. So if gold's 25 or $1,200, you're going to be paying 25. You're going to pay $280, a 25% margin on that. So it's going to be close to $1,500. The thing that's fascinating to me, though, and here's the point that no one else that I know has talked about: India and China, obviously with a Pakistani proxy. And watch Pakistan, everyone. It's the most dangerous country in the world. I will challenge anybody because of their nuclear forces, because I remember when Dr. Khan was basically given anything to anybody who could pay for it. He was held under house arrest, but pretty much, you know, if you wanted, and I used to tell people this, David, and you heard me, you know, they thought I was crazy. And the minute I would talk about this, the intelligence agencies would float a spokesman claiming there are no clandestine nuclear weapons. You cannot buy fissile material on the open market. And then I was writing a book. I never put a book out on PDF, but it was going to call, good night. I forget it now, but Lucifer's Luggage, Suitcase Nukes in America. And the point that I'm making about this, India is the only country with a population density that can, and there are some wealthy Indians, that can basically match China person for person. And if people think that the Indians don't know a little bit about defense technology, they absolutely have the longest history, and this is what I write about, 5,000 to 6,000 years of flying machines, nuclear weapons, and vitrified sand, meaning turning the sand to glass. Saying all that, the point that I'm trying to make is that there's a far different cry from what the nations are believed to have, according to the World Bank figures, and known to have. And David, I'm going to email you after the show or during the break this gentleman who's considered one of India's most, I guess he'd be the David Morgan of the Taj Mahal, okay? And that's not a racist statement. It's just giving credit where credit is due to you, and he would be your counterpart in the gold world over there. I doubt you speak Sanskrit. He does, okay, or can read it and write it. But the point being is that now we're at that time in history, well, I would call it the pre-panic phase. And one of my concerns as a dealer, and this is what I pay the most attention to out of everything I look at in a given day, is what's in the pipeline in, I would say, product availability to Mr. and Mrs. America or anybody on the planet that wants to have 10 Maple Leafs, 100 Maple Leafs, 100 Silver Eagles, 1,000 Silver Eagles. And when I see the people who I know are panicking in, and I think it was like, I just did the math, it was $28,400,000 worth of Silver Eagles being sold in one day. That's peanuts to some of the sovereign wealth fund. And if people don't get it, China now has more billionaires than the United States. And so when you've got a pro-gold government, which the Chinese government is, and you've got them saying to their citizens, you can buy whatever you want, one only has to look at that. But then if you look at India, India is the most gold and silver consumptive population in the world. Would you agree with me on that?
Absolutely.
And so Indians know something. They know that a rupee is paper, but gold is what they want. So it from the beginning of, and when I'm saying Indian, I'm talking about the continent of India, when from the beginning of their life, they begin to save to buy gold. And over there, the more gold you wear, the more, I would say, the successful people, or the people see the people with most gold as very successful. And by the way, and I'm not a rap fan, I don't listen to it, I don't watch it, but I see these guys now and then with a lot of gold hanging on them, okay? But the point in all of this is saying, India is the country I'm keeping my eyes on, because smuggling is going into India in amazing amounts. You probably saw last month alone, as compared to last year, they tripled their import of gold. That's fascinating, because India's population, someone can send me an email, but I think it's 1.2 or 1.3 billion people, and they're just a few hundred million under China. But saying that, and looking at the technology, especially weapons technology, the Chinese and the Indians are both developing weapon systems independent of each other, and obviously that takes a lot of the other metals that we'll talk about, platinum and palladium. You remember when you and I were doing a show, maybe, and please, I don't mean to be non-accurate, but it had to be at least 10 years ago, and we were talking about platinum and palladium and cold fusion, Pons and Fleischmann, the chemists. You remember those days?
Absolutely. I mean, there's still a question about cold fusion, and we did a special report on palladium for the Morgan Report subscribers some time ago about how undervalued it was, and that was about the only metal that was worth investing in over this year, because it's gone from like 700 to 900. It's been smashed down with the other two, but they're both undervalued as well. And yes, I do remember that.
I got to tell you a cute anecdote, and Doug, you'll appreciate this, Joe, and Dave, you'll appreciate this. When I used to tell people to buy palladium, when I first went on talk radio 23 years ago, it was $85 an ounce. Remember those days? And those days, that gold and platinum would kind of trade parallel, but you could almost count on platinum almost being a couple $100 more all the time than gold. So one of my critics said he couldn't wait to see me buried, and he prayed they would use platinum nails and I think platinum nails in my coffin. Well, I guess he wasn't an aficionado or one of my fan club. But I thought it was fascinating, because literally within probably a month after that statement, that's when the stuff started to zoom. And what's interesting about platinum and palladium is they are not only needed in cold fusion, they're needed in fuel cell technology, they're needed in high-tech weapons systems, and platinum is the only element we know that you can basically mix other, periodic table of elements in and not have it combine as a catalyst. So platinum crucibles are critical. Share a little bit, if you would, Dave, and by the way, first of all, give out the Morgan Report. How do people get that? Did they go on your website?
Yeah, the website is silver-investor.com, or you can use the URL themorganreport.com. Either one will take you to the website. But first of all, I think one of the arguments that you hear often on the web, especially from what I'll call the silver bugs, is that the natural ratio is how much silver is in the Earth's surface versus how much gold is in the Earth's surface, is roughly 9-to-1. You keep hearing the 16-to-1. That's the monetary ratio. That came out of Sir Isaac Newton when the system was failing, the monetary system was failing in Great Britain, and he suggested that they go back on a gold standard, and it basically saved them by doing so. And of course, silver was a bimetallic system, and they asked him, what's the correct ratio? And he looked at the market. The market at the time was roughly 15 to 1, so 15 to 1 would be the ratio, 15.5 to 1, could be the exact number, but you get the idea. So that is where it came from. That's an edict, that's a mandate, that's what it was. It's never been the natural ratio. The ratio from the 12th century to present has steadily gone down from a 12 to 1, that's in the Earth's surface, to about 9 to 1 or 10 to 1 if you want to use a round number today. So that's the natural ratio. So people say, well, if the natural ratio is 10 to 1 and gold's at 1,200, then silver should be 1/10 the amount, then it should be 120. Well, that's, it's a statement. It sounds correct, but it's not the way markets really work. Even in a free market, would it determine the price to be that? I don't know. The market knows more than anybody if it's free. But the point to say all that is to say this. Platinum is 30 times rarer than gold. So why isn't platinum 30 times the price of gold? Well, it's the same argument I just made on silver. It's because it is what it is. Now, platinum, I think, is very undervalued. The problem is palladium is twice as rare as platinum, and it sells for less. So if you really want to get out on the outskirts of precious metals investing, start doing some homework in the palladium market. Now, I own it. I bought it, I think right. I bought it well under the $700 level, and I put a pretty good stake in at about the $700 level when I recommended it to the readers of the Morgan Report. But it is a high-tech metal. I mean, how would it do in an economic collapse? I don't know. I think in an economic collapse, you really want to stick with the mainstream, which is gold and silver. How platinum palladium would do in that case, I think they would act as money. You probably could get value out of them. But they're, again, primarily thought of in the marketplace as industrial commodities, not as money. Although, to be fair and accurate, they have all the characteristics of classic money defined by Aristotle, as do gold and silver.
Hey, Doug, do we miss the break at the top of the hour?
Yeah, we've got to take. We just have to readjust the program clocks. Folks, you're listening to a very special edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. It is the 24th day of November, 2014. Very special guest, Mr. Steve Quayle, SteveQuayle.com. David Morgan, financial expert, precious metals expert as well. His website is silver-investor.com. The Morgan Report. Fantastic. By the way, Morgan Report, fantastic piece of information. Definitely suggest that. We're going to be right back, folks. Hi, folks. Doug Hagmann here for American Survival Wholesale, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Talk to the owners of American Survival Wholesale beginning this week, and folks, please take advantage of this. Beginning this week, it is the start of their White Wednesday sale. So beginning at 12:01 a.m., I believe that's Pacific time, on Wednesday morning, actually, through Saturday. And by the way, this is the biggest sale of the year. This is their biggest, largest, most incredible sale of the year at AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. You can go to HagmannandHagmann.com, click on the link to American Survival Wholesale, or go to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, and then navigate your way to the White Wednesday sale. 3 days only, beginning at 12:01, or I'm sorry, through Saturday only, or Monday, I believe it is. Help me out here. Monday. Anyway, it's for a limited time. It's on their website.
Wednesday, and 12:01 a.m. till Monday.
Till Monday. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I apologize. I got 17 windows open here, and that's an accurate account. At any rate, you will find incredible buys there. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. I mean, things that you would never think that you could get for the prices that they're offering. You can get a sneak peek by going to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com and going to their White Wednesday sale. We'll have a larger link up on our website as well. But you're talking about some things, like I said, that you'd never think that you could buy for so little. And folks, it's Christian-owned, veteran-owned company. They have a tremendous veteran outreach program, a tremendous Christian outreach program. By the way, just one example right now. A Thrive food pack, your choice of number 10 gallon size cans or smaller pantry size cans, 100.5. Boy, I can go on and on and on. I won't. Emergency survival blanket, just one more thing, under $3. I mean, come on, folks. This is incredible. And one of my favorites, I think probably one of Joe's, if he'd be another 20 years younger, would be a all-metal slingshot with a wrist brace for $15, right, Joe? You've done that before. And that's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, beginning 11/26 or November 26, 2014 at 12:01 a.m. Christian-owned, veteran-owned, our partners in this radio endeavor.
You better wake up fast and listen to this, America. The Obama campaign has launched attack squads disguised as truth teams dedicated to intimidating and silencing all political dissent carried over the internet that criticizes the Marxist Obama. Truth Squad specifically focused on covering up Obama's endless trail of lies, corruption, and subversion, and using the Gestapo power of our own government to police and censor the internet and shut down websites that dare to carry the real truth about Obama's Marxist coup. Remember the names of these Gestapo-style agencies that work right there in your neighborhood: KeepingHisWord.com, KeepingGOPHonest.com, and AttackWatch.com. KGB, SS, and Gestapo-style police-state gangster organizations that work to silence the important voices of patriot dissent, some of which have already been shut down by Obama's orders. Adolf Hitler would have been proud. We're the 21st century Tea Party patriots.
You want answers? I think I can handle you. Want? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our third and final hour on this Monday, November 24th edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Our special guests are Steve Quayle and David Morgan. David Morgan's newsletter, The Morgan Report, can be found off silver-investor.com. That's silver-investor.com. That's David Morgan's website as well. Steve Quayle for stevequayle.com. Just a quick update. The grand jury did not indict Officer Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown, and we see there are tear gas canisters flying, people trying to overturn cop cars, much as like we expected, the unrest we expected to see. But President Obama is on TV as we speak, trying to make it all better. So if they would all just listen to him, maybe they could give them the answers that they're looking for. Sorry to take off from the subject at hand, which is talking about the coming financial collapse and ways we can hedge the protection of our monetary system. For those who will wish to, Steve Quayle and Mr. David Morgan. I'm going to turn it back over to Steve Quayle, and we'll start this third and final hour.
Well, David, one of the things that we've got to deal with is there was a classic period when things made sense. And nowadays, things don't make sense because of the control. I got to share this, and Doug, thanks for sending it to me, because this guy gets it, and he's in New Zealand, and thank you, Chris, for sending it. And he said, Steve, I'm really enjoying your show. Thank you. I'm a silver bull here in New Zealand, and I often get the cold shoulder within Christian circles when it comes to sharing the love sharing the love on the preparation, gathering some precious metals for the imminent financial event. I would like to share with you what God revealed to me about Ezekiel 7:19 that talked about their gold and their silver. I would like to emphasize the word there. This signifies that it's different to other gold and silver. I believe theirs refers to paper or derivative markets, which one day will be thrown out on the Wall Street London Square. And he says, thanks again. You know, David, I never thought of that. I only looked at it as a possessive thing. But really, if you think about it, what they've done by ETFs, exchange-traded funds, is they've invented their version of it, and we all know it's not a real version. Have you ever considered that or heard anybody present that? I have not.
No, I'll be honest, I haven't. And wow, what a great insight. It really, really was, I don't want to be overly dramatic. I'm a pretty solid guy, but that was giving me a little zing when you said that. And you know what? He might be spot on.
Well, I got to tell you, I think he is. Let me share this too, because we've got two camps in Christianity. The ones that say just trust God. We're coming into the holiday season. Look, I know Jesus wasn't born on the 25th of December, but I want to say something. Whenever Jesus was born, 3 wise men showed up, and they gave him the 3 most precious commodities in the world. I never figured that out, why it was gold, frankincense, and myrrh, until one time I was really praying because I was getting a lot of flack, about, well, just trust God. And I will say this, and people have heard me say this, but it's important because it relates to what Chris just said, too. The gold, frankincense, and myrrh is what kept Jesus, Mary, his mother, and Joseph alive in Egypt when they had to flee for their lives. And I find it's interesting that many of us, depending on circumstances the Lord's leading, may be going to other places. But I think, nobody I ever know, or forgive me, no one I have ever known has ever presented that. So I will attribute it to Revelation and thank God for it. Because again, just as Chris in New Zealand is saying, by the way, Chris, thanks again. Amazing revelation. We see everything that God has made and created distorted. And again, it goes back to just measures. And I can tell you this, that Jesus wasn't sent into Egypt with Pharisee notes, Pharisee bills, and Pharisee bonds. He wasn't sent in with a promise to pay in the future and an IOU in the present. So for those of you who think that, faith is just blindly trusting, when you go to the doctor, God's bigger than your doctor, but you go. When you go to the dentist, God's bigger than your broken tooth or, whatever. The point being is that there's an unjust balance applied in preparation. I tell people that if the majority, not the majority, if half of the people that I get emails from criticizing this, criticizing that, if you tell people this is a biblical principle, you're a snake oil salesman. If you basically tell people the history of monetary metals, you're a charlatan. But the point that they don't get is that the history of the world, as I've understood it, as you've understood it, we both have studied it, shows this, that the people that were able to flee when they could flee, and that's a whole other topic for a different show, but they made it out. And so many people, and I want to share this with you, David, because you live in the part of the country where this took place. Have you heard this before? A lady was criticizing me, and she asked my forgiveness, and God bless her, I gave it to her, but she was mocking me. And that very night, God gave her a dream, and she and her daughter were fleeing from one state to another, and they were going through Idaho into Washington. And when they got to the border, the border guard said, and it was a Russian border guard. Now, this was I think maybe, 10 years ago. And the point is that the Russian said, what do you have for your lives? And she said, we have a little silver. He said, silly woman, silver is for food, gold is for your life. That woman, and she had integrity, God bless her, literally got back to me. Now, why is that kind of a cool story? Because, again, from our perspective, what has been familiar, that which basically undergirds normalcy bias, is what everyone likes to fall back on or fall back to. But now we're talking about different times. So based on how long you've been in the business and how long, we've both been in the business for decades, the point being is that now we're at a time where everything is changing. And tonight with you, David, it's the first night I have is literally seen when Russia and China will challenge the United States for the New World Order, it will be fascinating because it says even the Antichrist, even though he's the one that's going to make everybody have the mark of the beast, that they won't be able to buy, rent, sell, or trade without it, he still wants to live in the world of gold, silver, and precious jewels. And that's in the book of Daniel. So your thoughts on this, because again, things have changed versus where we were, 10, even 20 years ago, probably even 5 years ago.
Well, I agree with you. I think the only thing I can do, a couple things. One, I want to comment on the dream about silly woman, silver's for eating and gold's for your life. Well said. Couldn't have said it better. Something to bear in mind. I've always advocated owning both. I'm not a silver only. I think you should have a balanced portfolio, and that means starting with the hard money first. I do stuff in the mining sector, and I think there is going to be a massive run into that paper because basically a mining share is paper. But if the financial elite still have control of these markets, and I believe they will for a while longer, they're going to run anything with gold and silver in this name to phenomenal heights. And if you're smart enough to not get too greedy and take those paper profits from the bankers and cash out into real metal, if it's available, because I have to make that statement for my own integrity, you could have made probably some very good profits, but that's, to be determined. I like to veer off slightly, Steve, and give out some solutions because, we discussed the problem ad infinitum, and I think, especially followers of SteveQuayle.com, certainly people that follow my work closely are very well versed in what the problems are, but there aren't a lot of solutions. So, number one solution, I was speaking here at the Silver Summit a few years ago, and a gentleman heard me talk about what Utah had done a few years back, where Utah passed basically something that they wouldn't really need to pass if we obeyed the Constitution, but it was where anybody in the state of Utah could buy and sell in silver and gold for any product as long as both parties agree. So basically they're reaffirming or reinstating, if you want to think of it in those terms, a gold and silver monetary system. The problem with that is, as great as it sounds to people that, are pro-gold and silver, honest money or sound money, is how do you do it in real terms? And my idea was to put it in a debit card-backed system where a depository held the precious metals. It was inspected like monthly, and you would be debited a certain amount of metal, and it would be transparent to the vendor when you made a purchase. So I made that speech, and this gentleman came up and said, well, this is his dream to do it. And I said, good luck. I've been trying to get it off the ground for a couple of years. I've been working with the people in Utah, and they don't seem to be able to put it together. There isn't a bank out there that really seems to want to touch it. Well, this gentleman did do it. And so I want to give out his website, Steve, because a little more background. One of the biggest complaints I get from a lot of people that are kind of on the fence about buying precious metals is, well, I believe what you say, David, but how do I sell it? Well, this is a way to buy it and spend it into existence. In other words, you get a debit card that's backed by gold, silver, palladium, your choice, all four to a mix, and a cash side, which is the brilliant thing about this. So like any standard debit card by any bank, yes, it is in the banking system. Yes, you have to fill out the same type of information you would for any debit card from any facility. All that stuff is the same. The beauty is if you do a thought experiment and say, well, what if the collapse happened? So let's say, for talking purposes, you had $10,000 and you put $5,000 in the silver and $5,000 on the cash side, so you had $10,000 in this particular debit card. Or any variable there. You could say $100, you could say $10 million. I don't care. It's the idea I want to make clear. So half is in cash, half is in metal. And the collapse happens two weeks after you set up your account. What would happen is the cash side would be gone. That's in the banking system. That's in the paper paradigm. But the metal is held independent in your name, segregated to you, exactly what you bought. In other words, if you started your account with a bag of silver that you bought from Steve Quayle, what is it? What's your URL for your metal site, Steve? I'm sorry, I'm having a senior moment here.
SQmetals.com.
Yeah, SQmetals.com. Sorry. I spoke over SQmetals.com. So you have that bag or half bag. You ship that in. That's the exact metal you'll get back out. Now, if you spend it, obviously some's going to come out of that bag. But the point is that you have the ability to spend metal into the marketplace, if you want to consider it that way, by swiping a debit card at Safeway, Walmart, your auto mechanic, any place you can use a debit card now, you could use this metal for that debit card. So I think that's a brilliant solution. I just want to make it available. If you want to learn more about it, there is a website to go to, and that's pmb.vllc.com. I'll do it phonetically. It is, if I can do it, geez, I've got a pilot's license and then some. I can't even, I know it's Mike Bravo, but what is P? Papa Mike Bravo .Victor Lima Charlie.com. So PMB-VLLC.com. You can find out more information there. So that's number one. Number two, I'm only going to do two of these because these are the two most important, is people that want to hold precious metals in an IRA have some concern, and I think it's valid, about what will happen as things unwind further. And there is a way to hold precious metals in an IRA and still have possession of it yourself. It's rather complex.
David?
Yep.
Hey, David?
Yes.
I just got to share something because people know, and I'm not a fan of 401ks. I'm not going to argue with you, and that's not the point of this. But I just put up on my website for a survival 401k, okay? And they can set up limited trusts and have it, but the only products you can put in there to have actual control, according to the guy that has educated me on this, Ross Powell. So I just want to share with people that, there are ways to do it, but you got to do it by the book, okay? And since I don't know all of that, the way to do it, and there's a way you can keep it in possession, but I told Ross, I've been emailing back and forth with him, that unless they can keep it in their own vault, in their own place, storing at any depository is at some outside, I'm talking inside the country now, is a guarantee for at some point in the future confiscation. And I want to give out his website because, he was kind enough to bring it up to me, but it's called survival401k.com, survival, the number 401k.com. So the point is that there are strict limitations. Basically, it's silver eagles and gold eagles that you can store on the premise. But for people that want to know more, because we're running out of time, so I want to get into something else. Just seriously, take a look at my website. It's over on the right side, survival401k.com. Now go ahead and say what you want. I just didn't want to, not speak up on his behalf because there are specific things you got to do with LLCs, all, and he will walk you through it. So go ahead.
Yeah, this is a recommendation. Neither was the one on a debit card. This is, I consider, educational service for you, the listener, to do more due diligence. This is similar. It's with an IRA. It's called perpetualassets.com. That's perpetualassets.com, all one word again. I'm not going to recommend it. I'm going to say if you're interested in holding metals in your own name, you could touch them and still do all the intricacies, which are very detailed and have to be done, crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. Take a look at that website. I'm done, Steve. Let's go ahead and move on to the next topic as you see fit.
Right, and again, by the way, I looked at both, and those guys have some pretty good stories. But again, what I was impressed with, and I'll just say this, then we're done, is I was impressed with Ross's knowledge of the precious metals market and the simplicity and the way it's done. So people can do whatever they want. If you want to figure out and get a hold of him, which I recommend him, I talked to him at length, it's survival401k.com. Now, David, what should we expect? What would be, and this is the second biggest question I ever get, besides when's it going to move, but what are the factors that indicate to you, and you can go through the list, of when the market's going to turn?
Well, great question. I wish I had all the answers, but one is the premium on the bag market. That is moving up, so that's an indicator we're going to move. Second is backwardation. When we see that the spot month, or they get it now, costs more than a future month, that's an indicator. The other one is that we're getting very close to first notice day on the futures contracts, and there hasn't been a lot of movement. Now that, if this interview was going on 2 days from now, I'd be even more certain that something was a little fishy in the futures market. It's still, since this stuff can be done electronically at the click of a mouse, it's pretty tough to say it looks odd at this point in time, but it does. But I'd, again, be a little more sure. So you've got three things. You've got two that are solid. That's the premium in the bag market. It's also the backwardation. And I think a lot of it's just, internet talk, gossip, whatever you want to call it. There could be some validity to it. And the last thing is the simple fact that these metals are precious, that the amount of gold that's going into going into Russia and China, the BRICS countries, every indication that we have is, one, this thing can't go on forever. Things are unwinding as we speak. There are so many things happening that people are aware of, yet discount, like the German gold problem. And yet the system continues on. And then you get more and more ridiculous things happening all the time. I forget, Steve, you could probably help me out here. I think it was Deutsche Bank came out with an article on Zero Hedge about, you should sell your crummy gold now to us because who cares about it? I mean, it was, I'm ad-libbing somewhat, but it was, I think it was tonight. And I have to read a great deal to stay abreast of everything that happens in the financial system, the monetary metals.
Sure. Let me just decipher that. I don't speak. Hey, David, just on that one point, I don't speak Deutsch, but I will tell you what that means. We got to cover our behinds. We got to down talk gold, and we got to make sure that we get it as fast as possible. In other words, so much again from the planet bull manure that if it could be any more transparent than that, it would be with a Windex bottle attached to it. So continue on, because that's totally bogus. In other words, when they start to have to cover their non-existent gold positions, isn't that when the bell rings and the prices balloon?
Absolutely. And then you have this article by James Turk, who I mentioned earlier in the show. Hey guys, hopefully I'm connected still.
Yes, you're here.
Am I still on? Okay, sorry about that, Doug. I apologize. Let's drop the phone. It's my age. Anyway, James Turk has made comments about the possibility of the LBMA being extremely tight. We've heard this before, but he's in the know. In fact, a great deal of gold money goes to the LBMA, and he's an ex-banker. He ought to know. I know him personally. He's very high integrity. So there's lots of indicators that the dealer market is extremely tight. We've talked about the COMEX, how little really is in that market. And we also talked about how much paper there is versus how much physical there is. So everything's lining up for me. And I guess the last thing I'll say, having been in this industry for so long, is sentiment. And sentiment, of course, is feelings. It's a feely thing that you can't really quantify. But a lot of precious metals bugs are at the end. They're ready to throw in the towel. They think, this could go on forever, that the bankers will have control, it's been manipulated ad infinitum, et cetera, and that is far from true. But the sentiment is so low that it pretty much indicates that we are at or very near the bottom. Perhaps the bottom is behind us. I'm doing an interview for the Morgan Report subscribers tomorrow for the Mastermind series. And we're having a gentleman named Bo Polny. It's Bo, P-O-L-N-Y. You can look him up on Google. And he is convinced that we are going to start a huge bull market in the metals almost imminently. Now, I'm not saying I agree with him, but he had a very, very interesting study done in the precious metals that he presented, and he presented just before I gave my speech here at the Silver Summit just about a month ago. And what was interesting is the overlap. Now, I don't do cycle work. He does. That's his expertise. It's not mine. But we both agreed that the biggest run in the precious metals lies ahead. And as you said earlier, Steve, and it bears repeating, is there'll be far more silver bought above $30 an ounce than there is under $30 an ounce. And right now is the time to buy. But people will not buy lows. They do not buy bottoms. I know this for a fact. When I started silverinvestor.com many, many years ago, I actually told people they could buy, going back to the IGBE, International Bullion Exchange, you could buy gold at spot. Well, guess what? You could buy gold and silver under spot. Now, that sounds like I'm a liar, and let me explain. And it's a truth, and you can look it up and you can verify it. At the time, there was very few what I consider gold and silver holding companies. But one of them was Central Fund of Canada, which was started by Ian McAvity and some others in Toronto. And they held physical gold and silver at a ratio of 50 to 1. And that is a stock on the American Stock Exchange under the symbol CEF. And it was selling at a 9% discount to NAV. NAV stands for net asset value. In other words, you would be buying gold and silver physical. It's a physical fund and a very small management fee for a 9% discount. So I thought I would drum up business by being, by giving out this information. But all I got was hate mail. I felt like Steve Quayle for a while. I got tons of hate mail.
Yeah, well, welcome to my world.
And a lot of it were good Christians. And I would write them back and explain what I was doing, and I never got any apologies, but I move on. I did get a gentleman from Europe that said, he checked it out and said, wow, this is phenomenal. I want to buy this amount. I said, do not buy that amount at one time, because if you do, you're going to take the premium right out of the market. It's going to go to par, or it's going to go to a premium, not a discount. So if you're going to do it, buy a little bit at a time. And to this day, that guy thinks, I'm really a great guy. But the point I'm making, after I said all that, is people don't buy bottoms. And Steve, you're exactly right. Once the metals start heating up, silver gets above 26 and gold gets above 1550. Those are the breakdown levels. And once we've done that, we've reestablished the bull market. Anyone that does any technical work, and I do some, but I don't rely totally on it. But I know what the psychology will be. The psychology will be that the metals are a good thing again. But they're going to have missed the move from 1650 up to 26. They're going to miss a $10 move on a $16 commodity in silver, and they're going to miss a $1,200 to a $1,500 move in the gold commodity, a much smaller percentage, before they start getting interested again. Now, once you start getting new highs, like 1,900 gold and 50 in silver, then everybody and his brother is going to love it again. Well, it's hated now, so buy it now, because when it gets to that level, you already have a great opportunity. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating for the third time. I really believe this time that there will be a point where you will not be able to get it at any price, because what's going to happen is the dealer market's going to dry up, and Steve has done a good job of explaining that to everyone, and you might want to say it one more time, because the access to the market is much thinner than most people think. They think that there's just gobs and gobs and gobs of this stuff laying out there, and you can buy all you want at any given point in time at any given price, and that is far from the truth. It's a very precious commodity. It's been coveted forever. It's the only commodity that's outside of the paper paradigm. Everything gold and silver that's physical that you own, you can touch or store where you believe that it's actually there, is there if there's a complete total financial collapse, meaning the electronic trading system is either taken down by some kind of EMP event, some solar flare, or deliberately shut offline, which are our circuit breakers in the commodities markets and the stock exchange to protect the markets, which is at the whim of the elite to turn off the power and put what they call circuit breakers. This came out of the working group on financial markets. So it exists in all three modalities. But those metals will still work if any of those were to occur. Now, I'm not forecasting or predicting those will happen. What I'm doing is trying to do some critical thinking live on the air here to get you to think what you think might take place and what preparations you have made, because this show is about the financial situation as it actually is not some fantasy about how you want it to be, or some paradigm that you have an annuity and it's going to pay you umpteen % until, this date. Because believe me, you're living in a fantasy world. If you don't think that there's still massive problems in the banking system, the insurance industry, the annuities, and the derivatives thing, as Steve has continually pointed out, is so bizarre and so off-world as far as the reality of what it represents, that we're just waiting for 2008 to be actually a precursor to what happens the next time. And I think the next time we're not going to resurrect. I think the next time it's taking the system down. And when that happens, I don't know, but I know it can happen, that most likely will happen. And again, as I go back to the beginning of the show, most of these paradigms last about 40 years. We're in the year about 43 or 44 right now, and I don't think we're going to go another 10.
Well, and I would echo that too, but I'm more concerned right now with, let me share this. If anybody ever asked you, David, this was given to me by some of the biggest movers and shakers in the physical metals available to the public market. I'm not talking about tons and pallets of gold. But I asked the biggest guys who I know who have access to the information, I said, what does it take to buy every ounce of gold available for delivery from the U.S. Mint, from the Royal Canadian Mint, from the Perth Mint, from, every other mint out there, that's of substance? And they said 750 million buys it all in a week. I don't know if you've ever been presented with that. So I did the same thing. I will call it the David Morgan advanced equation set, okay? Quick and dirty. If you have anybody, if you take it up to $1,000, minimum purchase of $1,000, and I would say this, that just speaking from most dealers, I would say the average entry level nowadays is somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000. That doesn't mean that only rich people buy it, but that's the average. And I have customers that buy $400, and I have customers that add zeros on that. But the point that I'm trying to make is this: if you take 1,000, or no, let's just take it 10,000 or 5,000. Let's do 5,000. You take 5,000, you divide it into let's say 750 million. Okay, you're only talking about I think 150,000 people. Yeah. And so 150,000 people panicking. You said a number. Less than 1% of the people now are buying metals. What happens when it moves up to 3%? I remember when it was 2% prior to 1980. What was it, January 21st or whatever? I think you nailed the date earlier. I just say, the end of 79, the beginning of 80. But the point is that moved from 2 to 3% during the period it ran up there. And I guess what I'm trying to share with everyone, there are people now who basically, I was just watching a cool thing, because I like cool cars, on all the Chinese students moving over to the United States. And when you got the average Chinese student driving a $250,000 Porsche to a Lamborghini at $350,000 and then spending another $100,000 to get its performance up, and as far as the eye can see, there are these vehicles, that people are buying what they want. But those young men and women from China bring with them a history of gold that goes back multi-thousand years. So just put it in perspective. Even if you figure out that there's, and I'm just using this, make it $1 billion if you want, the availability of product could literally be bought up in a matter of days. Every single major distributor that's U.S. Mint validated, and you got to have 100 million cool liquid to do it. The bottom line is that you've got simply the ability now of more people than ever to buy it all up at source. That's why I tell everybody this. Price at this level is irrelevant. Delivery at this level is your prime directive. And again, when I tell these stories, I'm not trying to be vicious to my competition, and we didn't even have time to talk about it, but you remember when you and I both said don't buy rare coins? And we saw the heinous, and I call it heinous, rip-offs that were being taken. A guy would buy, let's say, an 1889 Carson City, and get it certified through PCGS or NGC. I left that world almost 15 years ago. But the point being is that, you know, a lot of people thought we were unkind, and certainly we weren't favored citizens amongst the world of rare coin dealers. But now, at the end of the day, it always boils down to the same thing. What's the bullion value? I don't care if they stamp your face on it, my face on it, whatever they want to stamp on the coin. Now, obviously, I'm being a little bit, you know, presumptuous here. I'm not putting my face on any coins, and I don't think you are either. And I'm not saying we think we should have our face, but I'm just saying it doesn't matter what's on it as long as it's fineness, as long as, you know, it says U.S. Eagle, Canadian Maple Leaf. I had a guy call me about Krugerrands. I said, I can't tell you the last time. You're the first guy in 1 year that's ever called me about buying Krugerrands. And, I mean, just to put something, to show you how much Krugerrands have fallen out of favor. So what I'm saying to people tonight is simply this. Delivery's everything. And I'll say it one more time. Delivery's everything. If I could name the day the market changes, I could afford to give everybody 1,000 ounces of silver. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I'm just saying the guy that knows that, you know, would be fairly wealthy overnight beyond wildest dreams, especially if it was leveraged. I'm not telling anybody to do that. But the point that has to be made is if you're playing in the paper markets with ETFs, if you're trusting someone's possession of your money more than you want to possess it, I can tell you stories about doctors and dentists, God bless you both, if you're, you know, listening, those of you doctors, who have literally told me they lost $1 million in XYZ brokerage firm in the paper market, blah, blah, blah. And two of them I basically told, don't do it. And one of them had a chance to basically turn $250,000 into $2 million, and he just basically didn't have the cojones to handle his own money. He said I was too busy. My answer to the people who claim they're too busy to handle their own money, then someone who has plenty of time to mishandle your money will take it from you. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I'm too busy. If I can interject something here, I'm too busy to handle my own money. You know, I got so much of it, right? Mr. Morgan, I probably got, we at the studio probably got, a good dozen and a half questions asking about the same thing here. So I'm going to kind of formulate the question to accommodate the 18 or so emails that I have here. And it's this, and I don't even know if you can answer it, but give it a shot. If you're the average person out there, the average prepper, the average person with house, 2.5 kids, grown, retired, whatever. You got some money in the bank. I mean, or you got some money, you got some cash, whatever. What is the average person to feel comfortable? How much, for example, in the shoebox or in the trunk at grandma's house or whatever, how much gold and silver would, at what point should that average couple feel, or that average person or family feel comfortable? Is it 1,000 ounces, 10,000 ounces, 10 ounces of silver, or, you see where I'm going with this? I mean, I know everybody's situation is different. I get that.
Right.
But people are looking for some sort of semblance of, okay, well, if I have 1,000 ounces, I'm better off than most, and it's cool. Or if I have 10 ounces, or whatever it might be. What's your thoughts on that?
Sure. I think it's a great question, and thanks for bringing it up. First, I want to digress a bit, and the less, funds you have available, the first thing you probably should do is get some extra food. I mean, I love zero lose bets. And if you bought extra food, you can't lose unless you quit eating. And I don't know anyone that can live on air and water alone. So that would be number one. But to answer the question, let's go back, and I digress because it makes a point. But if you go back to the Roman Empire, we'll discuss that on the show, an average worker was paid about 1/10 of an ounce a day. So I'm not saying that that's what is going to happen at the end of the monetary system, but if it were to occur at that level, then think of it in terms of 1/10 of an ounce a day. But let's just round it up by an order of magnitude, by a factor of 10, which would be an ounce a day. And that's pretty legitimate. I think that's at least where we're going to go to. So if an ounce of silver per day is what you would need for the average person, which is what we're talking about, then how many ounces do you feel secure? How many days do you need to feel secure? Do you need 30 days, 60 days, 3 months? Most financial planners in the mainstream will say you need 6 months of cash on hand. So 6 months is 180 days. So let's round that up to 200 ounces of silver. Does that make sense, Doug? Because if it does, then I want to revisit the question. Because I think it does. Extremely important. It's your show, and you invited me on, and you give me a lot of time, and I want to do my absolute best for everyone that tunes into the show.
Well, I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Morgan. I've never heard it explained that way, and it makes perfect sense to me, and I think that appeals to all people of all situations, all conditions, and all family sizes. So, I mean, you just think of it that way. So, Steve, any comment? Do you agree? It sounds...
Well, here's the thing. I would tell anybody, for instance, I get emails day in and day out, should I get 20 ounces of silver? I say, no, you should get food first. The old adage is this: anything, you've got to be, and I put it up on my website today, again, I think I sound like a broken record, but you want to be where everyone else isn't. If everyone is rioting in Ferguson, Missouri, you don't want to be there. If everyone is rushing to whatever Albertsons, you don't want to be there. It's the same thing. When everyone is rushing to the metals, you don't want to be there, because we did have delays, and when I say this, when everybody was trying to get into the silver, and David, this is true, my company sold probably 10 times more silver at the highest point in this current run-up, a couple of years ago, than we sold when you could buy it for $15 an ounce, okay? So the point you want to be, you want to move ahead of the market, and I like what David said, because I think it's going to take 1 ounce of silver per person, per family. I think inflation is going to kick in, and I think without inflation factored in, and I think you can have, again, what Howard Ruff called stagflation. You can have a stagnant economy, and anybody who's familiar with the black market, and what I'm talking about, a black market is not illegal, selling drugs, guns, all that stuff. I'm talking about the market that produces the product when the paper currency crashes, that people set up alternative means of exchange. You'll always know, for instance, that gold and silver have a world value. It's not going to take the guy much longer than a shortwave radio listening in, and I think that it's 1 ounce per person, per family, per day, and that's everything, because everything will gear up in an inflationary manner, and you can't, again, if right now, let's say silver were $50 an ounce, it would buy, what's gas, $3 a gallon, so 16 gallons. In Bozeman, Montana, I think premium's $3.30, and right now silver is, $19, so we're at six gallons about. So what I'm trying to share is what David just said too. If you want to look at minimums, that's fine. I subscribe to this. It doesn't matter. Gerald Celente, one of the smartest guys in the world, and he admitted he had money with Corzine, and thank God he got 80% of his investment. But you see, I don't subscribe to parking money except overseas if you're leaving the country. If you can't touch it, you don't own it. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and I'll even make a different statement than that. Possession is everything. Without it, it will cost you your life. And I mean that. That's not being melodramatic, but you gotta eat. And if you can't eat, you die. End of story. Go ahead, David.
No, great. Well said. So is there any other questions that have come in, Doug, that we should address before we close out?
No, actually, we've got about 2.5 minutes, Steve, and that about covers it. I mean, we've got disparate questions everywhere, but that one question there seemed to be a common theme among the people that had been emailing us. I want to thank you, Mr. Morgan, for all of the information that you provided. Silver-investor, silver-investor.com. It's hard linked off of HagmannandHagmann.com and SteveQuayle.com. Thank you. Steve, you got the final word. You can take us out. 2.5 minutes.
Well, I want to thank David, too, because it's been a while. But, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you this. David has been consistently right. He doesn't just take anybody's word for anything. And I consider him a good friend, and I consider him probably the most knowledgeable guy in the world of silver I know. And that's not flattery. You see, this is amazing. When a person is what they are, true humility is just being who you are, not trying to be somebody else. As long as I've known David, and I've known him, like I say, for 20 years, we've done business together, and the thing is that he's always just trying to be as matter of fact, and yet when I hear David say he's concerned, and I want to say this too, David, I have in my spirit that the next time is it, okay? That doesn't mean we'll have another run up where silver will go, let's say, $500 an ounce, and gold goes $5,000, and then pull back, because at that point, we're talking about the country we now live in is no longer what we grew up in, and at that point, when you've let's say this doubled your money, people always ask me, when should I sell my gold or silver? I tell them, when it's doubled, sell half. When it's triple, sell a third, and you'll find out if you do the math, you made a lot of money, and you can give it away. My goal is to make everybody a lot of money so that out of their blessing and abundance, they'll take up the cause of the needy and the poor. Most people don't know this, but Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't just judged because of its sexual sins before God, is they just didn't care about the poor and needy. And the tragedy in this world is that we got multi-gazillion dollar and, churches, fellowship centers, rock and roll productions, blah, blah, blah. And there's still our brothers and sisters being butchered, murdered around the world, and people who are as redeemed as I am starving in this country. So my goal is to give as best information as I can to make a lot of people faithful stewards. And again, if you have a hard time with what David Morgan and I are talking about, you better go and read the parable about the man that had 10, 5, and 2 talents, the guy that didn't do anything with it. In other words, he was afraid to take accountability and responsibility, basically had everything that he had taken from him. David, thank you. God bless you. Thank you so much. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the Morgan Report, MORGAN Report.com. Doug, blessings to you. Joe, blessings to you. And thank you all for tuning in tonight to Hagmann and Hagmann.
Hey, job well done. God bless you, Mr. Morgan. Thank you so much, folks. That'll do it until tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless.
Thanks, David.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.